Hey there, kids. It's time to sit because Battleground Casual is on. Here's Aaron or Matt.
Wow. Bravo to Adele. I heard she is, in fact, being nominated for a Grammy. The Grammy nominations haven't came out yet, but the voters and everybody heard this song and it affected them so much positively that they had to nominate it for Best Original Song. So shout out to Adele. Shout out to Taylor Swift for promoting it and sponsoring the song and just being a producer on it. It's a heavy hitters involved with that song. So I just want to take a moment. Let's clap. Congrats to Adele for getting a nomination for singing the theme song to Battleground Casual.
Every week I hope and pray that eventually that bit will die. We shall see.
It's not a bit.
Hello,
It's real.
everybody. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the latest episode of Battleground Casual. Thank you guys for tuning in, whether you are here or live or watching after the fact. I am Aaron Knoll, your host, as joined by my co-host, Matt Beer. Matt, how's it going?
I'm doing wonderful. Doing really good. Aaron, I think you know why I'm laughing. But no, I'm doing good. Just look over to the right. I'm doing good. Getting ready to begin the process of moving in a couple weeks, so that's exciting. Gonna have much better internet, which is always great. Background's gonna look different. I might get a green screen and crazy things in the background.
Oh, you mean we can get Ben Affleck's like toe in full effect?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be high definition. The toe's gonna be aimed towards my mouth, and then I'll let people assume what's happening.
All right, guys. Well, as the title says of the video, we are going to be doing a Transformers spoiler talk tonight. We're also going to be introducing a new segment, so to speak. We'll get into that later. But that said, since we began segmenting and structuring the show, everything has gone better. I have an easier time preparing for the show. The views have gone up. It seems like when I speak to people, they're enjoying it more. So that said, we're going to get into the first segment, which is the non-starters, which are the stories that came out this week that were important enough to bring up, but there is no real discussion to them. That said, our first non-starter, Matthew Vaughn's latest film, Argylle, has changed its release date from September 2023, which was its vague sort of release date, to February 2nd, 2024. The movie also got promoted from a streaming-only release to a theatrical release, thanks to a partnership between Universal Pictures and Apple Plus TV, where it was set to go. Henry Cavill stars as a spy suffering from amnesia. Sam Rockwell, Bryce Dallas Howard, Bryan Cranston, John Cena, Sam Jackson, and singer Dua Lipa all co-star. This is a non-starter because, well, that's the story. There's not always a negative reason for it. Sometimes there's just not enough to talk about. A potentially cool movie is going to theaters, and that's dope. That said, that's also the only non-starter tonight. There wasn't as many news stories this week. So with that said,
there's none.
That's it. So we'll go ahead and jump into the next segment. Now, I have enjoyed doing the videos over the last couple of weeks because it saved me from the awkwardness of having to read this live. Unfortunately, when it came to editing and processing the images for the show this week, my phone froze up and there was an error when I tried to transfer them over to my computer because technology is really, really useful. And then sometimes it's stupid. I tried making the video with just a stock image in the background, and I thought that was weirder than me just reading it. So I'm just going to read you this week's Way Too Late weekly box office report, of course, focusing on the opening of Transformers from last week. Transformers Rise of the Beast was a difficult movie to track for those who try. Early reports as recent as a month ago predicted it to open somewhere around the $30 to $40 million mark. Then, after positive discourse online, it seemed to rise up to nearly $70 million in predictions before a last-minute markdown to around the $50 million line due to a lack of pre-sales for the film. With all said and done, the movie opened to a solid $61 million in its opening weekend, despite a very tough competition from Spider-Verse. This should be considered an initial win for the series, as this is an improvement over both Bumblebee's $21.7 million opening and the last night's $44.7 million opening as well. Across the Spider-Verse did provide incredible competition for Transformers, though, coming in second place with $55.5 million at the box office. The film actually beat Transformers with its daily totals on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, only coming in second place due to a high spike in Transformers viewing numbers on Friday. The movie also finished out its weekend by passing Into the Spider-Verse's box office both domestically and internationally. The first film in its entirety grossed 190 million domestically and 384 million worldwide. After just 9 days, Across the Spider-Verse has passed that domestic number. It took 12 days to pass the international number. The film currently has a gross of 390 million globally as of when I wrote this write-up on Monday. However, I imagine it is coming close to passing the $400 million mark if it hasn't already. Moving on from the frontrunners, Little Mermaid took 23.2 million for third place. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 takes 7.22 million, squeaking out fourth place. The Boogeyman has an incredible week 2 hold, taking in 7.15 million for fifth place, dropping only 42% from week 1 to week 2. Fast X drops out of the top 5 after just 3 weeks there, taking in 5.3 million for sixth place. And the Super Mario Brothers earns another 2.2 million in week 10 as it finally shows signs of slowing down, taking 7th place. About My Father takes 8th place with 837,000, with The Machine taking 577,000 for 9th place. Both films look set to be a major loss for their respective studios, with their box office runs most likely coming to an end this week. By the way, my prediction was correct. With 3 wide releases, the movies both only just crossed the $10 million mark worldwide last weekend, with each having a cost of somewhere between 20 and 30 million for production. Using my rough estimate numbers that have been used on the show before, where theaters take 30% of the box office and studios spend 50% more of their production budget to market the films, About My Father could lose Lionsgate as much as 35 million, while Burt Kaiser's The Machine is set to lose said Legendary and Sony Pictures 23 million. Finally, the A24 film Past Lives lands in the top 10 in its second week of release. Playing in only 26 theaters nationwide, the Sundance hit grossed 417,000 for that last place spot. The indie hit You Hurt My Feelings and Gerard Butler's Kandahar both dropped out of the top 10. All right, so with that said, as always, we'll talk about the box office for Transformers when we get to the film itself. But Matt, out of everything else in that top 10, what stands out to you the most? And I will repeat things if you need me to, because, you know.
No, I got the top 10 up here. I mean, Guardians only dropped 32%, still doing. I don't think it's going to hit $1 billion by the looks of it at this time,
No.
but still, I mean, it's not like falling off completely. Also, the Boogeyman being ahead of Fast X is something I, even after its opening weekend and in week 2 and 3, I never thought that would happen. I never thought we would see Fast and Furious fall behind the Boogeyman, which is absolutely crazy. I guess Spider-Verse dropping 54%. That's a pretty good, drop. It's not like incredible. It's not like phenomenal, but I thought that was a pretty good. And then Little Mermaid's doing pretty well in the U.S. still. Internationally, it's a different discussion, but it's probably going to hit $500 million, which, it's not great. Could be worse. It's probably going to lose a little bit of money because of the marketing and the theater cuts and whatnot, because that movie costs like $250 million or $200 million.
Yeah, and that's pre-marketing. It was a crazy cost.
Yeah, it's like for just like Campion, everybody says you always want your movie to make 3 times the budget.
Your budget.
Because marketing, theater, all that stuff. So It's doing really well in the US, but internationally, my thoughts with one country in particular.
We discussed last week, it is making less than peanuts in China, so it's not making money.
Budget, I can tell you real quick.
So while you're looking that up, I'll jump in. Obviously, based on how much research I did into it, because I was just so curious about it. About My Father and The Machine, just the latest in this trend that sort of rises every couple of years, where they'll take a popular stand-up and they'll kind of put them in their own film. Last year, of course, we saw Joe Coy's Easter Sunday was what the movie was called.
Yeah,
That
I
movie
think it was
lost
Easter
a lot
Sunday.
of money for the studio. Now that movie was also abysmal by all accounts. At the very least,
Right.
like Joe Coy fans didn't like that movie. At the very least, from what I've heard, Maniscalco's fans did enjoy About My Father, and Burt Kreischer's fans certainly
Mhm.
enjoyed The Machine because again, it's very directly based on his stand-up. Do you think it's worth it for studios to invest in stand-ups as actors in that way anymore? I mean, losing 35 on About My Father, losing 23 potentially with The Machine, is it worth it?
I think it is. I mean, if you make a good movie, it's going to
Right.
do good enough. I think it was a really bad decision for both studios to have these two movies release the same weekend.
The same weekend.
Because I do think there is
Because
some crossover.
they cannibalized each other.
Yeah, and there's some crossover, I would assume, between those two comedians. Kreischer is a more well-known comedian than Sebastian is, but they're not like big money, makers. They're not people that draw, or they're not actors that draw people in. Like,
Right.
like honestly, I think like Matt Rife is, he's blowing up right now. He's one I think right now. If they made a little comedy like what they did with Machine or About My Father, I think that would do really well. Because he's like massive.
Yeah,
He's
I
bigger
agree
than
with
both
you.
those
I
guys.
I, I think at
So
this point, like
just don't
I
spend
feel
crazy
like
money.
yeah,
That's
also
my
don't
thing.
spend because like with About My Father, I
Is
feel like part of it has to be De Niro. How much did they pay to get him
Yeah,
in
De
this
Niro
movie?
cost half the budget. It
Like
wouldn't
how
surprise me
much
if he
did they
got paid
pay to
half.
get him in that movie? Because he is your selling point. You're right. Burt Kreischer and that story specifically, like in the past, I've compared it to like Jim Jeffries and the gun safety bit. It's like Burt Kreischer. If you
Mhm.
don't know Burt Kreischer stand up overall, like you haven't seen his
Yeah,
specials on Netflix or seen his podcast with Tom Segura, you know that story. You've probably heard that bit. You've probably seen it scrolling on Facebook somewhere. Um, Maniscalco's not as known, but he did have De Niro, which of course is one of two things. It gives you a better selling point, which is why About My Father has earned more than the Machine has and it's held better than the Machine has, but
yeah,
also it makes you lose more money because there's no way he did that on the cheap.
right. And I was just looking at the budgets for both. About My
Right.
Father was 29.1, and The Machine was 20. I think
Yes.
I think they're gonna make their money back because of VOD. I think you're gonna have like
You think they'll
FX,
hit the
and
sales?
like you're gonna have the TV channels. Yeah, I think that's where it's gonna make its money back. And
Yeah.
I think The Machine for sure, because of I think a lot of Kreischer fans probably didn't just go out to the movies because they probably just didn't want to. But I feel like his fans are going to support that movie when it's out and available to watch at home. These are two movies I think that would be really good for viewing at home. I
Streaming.
think, yeah, streaming. I think if you release, like, if either one of these released in February, at least like The Machine About My Father might have been a little more tricky. I think it would have done well. Like, I think if you're gonna release and spend like 20 to 30 million dollars on comedians that aren't like Bill Burr status, Dave
Right.
Chappelle type of status, I think either release it kind of beginning of the year or just do like a $10 million budget. That's what I would
Yeah.
do.
And
Or
that's
just
part of it
release them when
is
there's no, like, August or September would be perfect for these movies.
because there's no
That would have been
competition.
perfect because there's
Well, I
nothing
mean,
out.
think about because like you're saying that like think about when most Kevin Hart films come out. Unless he's in like a blockbuster,
Mhm.
they don't come out unless it's in like February or October or like those months.
Yeah.
Like the only films that have come out during blockbuster periods are like the Jumanji films or when he did Central Intelligence with
Mhm.
The Rock. Like there's got to be something else in there to sell it bigger. Um, I also think you're right. I
Right.
think this is just a case with these two that maybe they're not big enough. They have an audience, but they're not big enough to sell a movie. Um,
Mhm.
I don't. I'm not sold on the like. Okay, I'll go with an example. I think maybe holds a bit better than the Matt Rife one, just because he's a very young stand-up who is coming up very quickly. Andrew Schultz,
Mhm.
and especially because he's had
Yeah.
bit parts in a handful of films over the last year or two. Like he was probably one of the funniest things in You People, which is a movie I did not like. It's in my bottom 10 so far this year. But he was
Yeah.
funny for the little bit he was in it, playing one of Hill's Jewish cousins. I think if you
Mhm.
put him in a movie, that might sell better because he has that same rise in popularity, but he's had a little more time to nourish it and hold it.
Yeah.
Whereas,
I I don't know about him. I think a movie with him would probably do about as well as The Machine or About My Father. I
yeah,
think you would need like Pete, like you got to look at guys like Pete Davidson, you know, Matt Rife, you know, guys that are like the thing with Matt Rife is, yeah, he maybe isn't as hasn't been in the comedic game as much as like Burt Kreischer was, but the ladies love him. Like there's a lot of ladies I think he's super attractive. He's a really funny
I guess,
guy.
yeah.
Guys think he's funny. You got the ladies. Um, you got young, old, middle age. You got all you got all those people interested in Matt Rife.
That figure is going to be a
You know,
hard.
maybe a year or two.
That's going to be the hardest cleanup job since 50 Shades of Grey. That is a tough theater to
Yeah,
clean up, man.
it's going to be a fire hose. It is going to be just Splash Mountain. You wonder where you guys want to know where Splash Mountain's at? It's in whatever theater's playing
In
Matt
that
Rife's movie.
theater.
You release a movie next year starring Matt Rife, and he's acted in some stuff too. It's not like he's never acted before. Like he's done some
Right.
like just really small like
And for what it's
type of
worth, like
roles.
I was gonna say like the difference between like the examples you're citing and I've cited and the
Mhm.
guys that we're talking about now, like if you want to look at Kevin Hart, Bill Burr, and Pete Davidson, I think the biggest issue, and we'll move on after this, is
Yeah.
those guys can actually act. Like they've actually done projects that are more than just them
Mhm.
being a comedian leading a project. Like Bill Burr can fucking act when you give him a chance to.
Yeah.
Pete Davidson can as well. Kevin Hart probably less so, but he's got a shtick and he's been around long enough and he can fit into it perfectly. Yeah, I don't know, man.
Right.
It's a very niche thing, and unfortunately, we just had two. I'd say back to back, but two identical runs that did not work for these studios. So good
Right.
luck to the next.
Actually, and look, you know who actually would be somebody who would actually just shop have a movie make like 50 million bucks to $100 million is Theo Vaughn. There's a lot of people because you put him in some like weird movie where it's like a
I
low
don't know,
budget
man.
and he just acts like himself. I
Because
think that one
that strikes me
surprised a lot of people. There's a
at the
lot of
same
people that
tone
just
as Burt
find
Kreischer because I feel like Theo Vaughn's picked up a lot of success off of his podcast, which is the same way Burt Kreischer did, and that didn't work for Burt. So I don't know if it translates for him.
and the reason why I say with him more, and I think he'd be a little different in Burt Kreischer is, well, yeah, his podcast, he's gaining a lot of, you know, fame is kind of a interesting word to use. Like a lot of people are knowing him from his podcast, TikTok.
Notoriety.
Like and like TikTok is like anytime I go and I
Right.
scroll on TikTok and I
Um,
see Theo Vaughn pop up, it has like 500,000 likes to 1,000,000 likes, and like that's same. And that's why I would say Matt Rife too, because Matt Rife has blown up probably
I'm,
because
I'm,
of TikTok.
I'm gonna have to steer the conversation because going there, for anyone who doesn't know, I love stand up. Like I genuinely love
Mhm.
stand ups. That's why I know a lot of who these guys are. I could talk about
Yeah,
this for the next 2 hours. So I'm gonna have to steer
right.
the conversation away just because we could just keep going. Instead, we'll move on to the actual show that we have planned for you. So
Yes.
joining us, it's a bit of a smaller panel tonight. For the Transformers spoiler talk, it's just going to be myself and Matt. However, we do have a guest joining us for the news segment of the show. And I wanted to bring him in because vocally, in terms of being in the chat and watching the show, he's been here he's been a consistent viewer throughout, and he's one of the few people who has been watching that we haven't had a chance to have on the show yet. So joining us for the news is Mr. Jonathan Peck. John, welcome. How are you doing?
Doing good, Aaron. Doing very good. After I kind of dozed off for a minute ago about all this
I'm
stamina
sorry we
maneuver.
did that.
It's okay. Scratch that. I was just joking along with it, and yeah, and I was just kind of waiting around here, eating my dinner along with it, just eating out some food, and I very good though. I was very tempted to like maybe try to message you to basically, can I get on the show? But I don't want to be that guy's like keep persisting you. I was like, can I come on? Can I come on? And then until you message me, it's like, okay. So I don't know how to do much pressure. So you done my job for me. So thank you on that. And very good. And I very excited this was stored.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll go ahead and jump into the news stories here. As I said, same rules apply to the box office video. Images got corrupted. A blank background with my voice was eerily weird. I think they could make a shitty Black Mirror episode about it. So I'm just going to read everything out loud. With that said, though, moving on to our first topic, you have to talk about it because Disney put out a catastrophic's a big word, a very plate shifting announcement in terms of dating films and shifting release dates for a lot of things. They completely rearranged the puzzle that is their release calendar. So let's break it down piece by piece. And we'll start with the biggest piece of that puzzle, which is Marvel. Marvel reshuffled their entire schedule. The biggest shock was probably Deadpool in the midst of a writer's strike, a pending actor's strike. Deadpool moves up its release date from November of 2024 to May 3rd, 2024. Everything else that's currently either in production or on hold was pushed back. Captain America Brave New World will open in July 2024, Thunderbolts in December 2024, Blade in February 2024, Fantastic Four in May 2024. Avengers Kang Dynasty gets bumped a whole year to May 2026. Same thing with Secret Wars, which gets bumped to May 2027. And Marvel has dated 3 blank Marvel dates for movies that are yet to be announced, all of which are in 2026, February 13th, July 24th, and November 6th, meaning that if these hold, 2026 would be the first year that 4 movies released in since 2020, when there were also 4 films that released within 1 calendar year. So with that said, we'll start there. Since I'm not playing the video, we'll just go through it bit by bit rather than me reading it all at once. We'll go through it bit by bit that way. So Matt, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Marvel shifting its entire calendar?
It's expected. With all the writer strikes going on and, some of the projects having some issues like Blade, it's not surprising. Deadpool is definitely a surprise.
Yeah.
Thought they'd kind of hold off on that. Maybe they think the writer strike's going to end sooner rather than later. And, you can have Ryan get back to doing improv and whatnot like he did with the first 2. So that really did surprise me. But I guess they have the script, so maybe filming's production, all that stuff's going well. But I'm not surprised by everything else. I was wanting some of these things to be pushed anyway, just because it felt like they were just rushing this entire saga that they're doing. Because it was like Phase 4 was 2022, 21, right? Is that when WandaVision came out?
2021 through 2022. Yeah.
So years. 21. So if they would have actually stuck with the original releases, Secret Wars would have came out in 2025. So you would have done all this in 4 years. It's like they have all, the shows, movies, and all that stuff coming out. They need to keep pushing, push some of the stuff back. And I think writer strike is obviously part of it, but I also think maybe this is Bob Iger's influence coming in. Say, hey, let's not push everything out all at once. And honestly, I thought Secret Wars should have came out in 27 anyway, at the absolute earliest.
I think the writer's strike, I agree with you. I think this is technically probably the writer's strike affecting projects. Like in terms of what's there, we know that Blade still needed a rewrite, which Nick Pizzolatto was working on. We know Fantastic Four needed a rewrite, which I forget the gentleman's name who wrote the Avatar films. Josh Fieldman. He was working on. Thunderbolts had to halt its production because they were finishing up rewrites as well on the film. Jake Schreier brought in his co-writer from the show Beef to work with him on the movie, and they were doing rewrites. They paused that. Deadpool and Brave New World seem to be the only 2 that are able to continue production at a solid rate. I think it is just the case with Deadpool. I think they are just going to use the script, and that is what it is. I think
Yeah.
from everything that I've heard, it seems like Reynolds was spending a lot of time leading up to the beginning of the production working on said script because he did spend a few
Mhm.
weeks just living in Wales towards the end of the season with Wrexham, the club that he owns over there. He was in
Yeah.
Wales a lot. And
Mhm.
from everything I've heard, it's just a case of I think it was him, Reese and Wernick, and then they brought in a writer named Zeb Wells, who is a comic book writer, but he's also written for comedy in film, and he was a punch-up writer on She-Hulk.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to kind of go at that, but I'd argue that he also wrote one of the better episodes. I forget which one it is, but he wrote one of the later episodes, which I do think were stronger than the
Was it
earlier
Daredevil?
episodes. Huh?
Was it the Daredevil episode?
It was either that or it was the therapy episode.
Okay. I hope it was the
Yeah.
Daredevil episode.
It was
I
one of the
didn't like
two.
the therapy episode.
No, that's fair. It worked for me, but the idea is,
And
the four of them have just been working on this script with Sean Levy. I think they were kind of prepared for this, and they got it to a place where they felt comfortable to just use it.
and what I right, and what I think they could do with
That or
Deadpool
he's
when it
incurring
comes
a
to
lot of fines while shooting this movie.
yeah, and what I think they could do with Deadpool and be a little tricky because you can't do improv and stuff and have that be used for the movie.
Not too
Maybe
much. Not too
he's
much though.
going to do it, but they're going to just put that footage away. I don't know if they can do that or if he can't do it at all, even if they're just going to tuck it away. I think
Technically,
there's
the
a
rule, so
workaround.
the specific rule with Deadpool is because Ryan himself is a WGA member, he
Yeah.
cannot ad lib. The other actors
Right.
on set, because they're not WGA
That's
members, are allowed to
yeah,
ad lib, but he cannot change his dialogue to
that's
reflect
true.
what they are doing, and he can't specifically write anything or add anything.
I guess
I mean,
that's true.
look, for all we know, they could do exactly what you're saying, right? Because it's like, as has been discussed very publicly, it's kind of an unspoken thing that like writers are writers at the end of the day, right? Like all these writers that are on strike
Yeah.
in their free time, they're still developing ideas, they're still working on scripts that they
Yeah, they're
haven't
still
pitched yet.
writing.
They're just not doing studio work, right? So there's no
Yeah.
way that they're not completely working on stuff that they have. And
Let's just
so
say, I don't want me to cut you off, but even
no, go ahead.
even some of the members are part WGA, they're still writing material. Let's just say some stand-ups are basically part of the WDGA. They're writing for it, but then not for studio notes. They're just more their, let's just say, their own stand-up, all that stuff.
Right.
Right.
And so
look,
I mean, look, what it all comes down to is like, unless there's a member of the WGA over observing everything in the UK where they're shooting this, theoretically, if he wanted to lie, he probably could ad lib and then just rewrite the script to put it in and get away with it. If no one's paying close enough attention. But I mean, I don't want to speculate because I don't want to put out there that that's what he's doing. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
no. It's just an
also
idea I thought.
he
they
seems
might be
like the
able to
type of
do.
person that may also be secure enough to just run with the script.
Yeah, and what they could do is too shoot the movie as is with the script, just do all that, and then look. I don't see the writer's strike going into October. I think the writer's strike's going to be over. I'm going to throw out a guess. Latest August is the latest I see this going, because it's been going on for a while
I was
already.
gonna say people in the know seem to think Labor Day is when it'll.
Like
I think
first week of September,
August, early September, because you got to get it done before football season. Look, get your stuff worked out, then you can go back watch college football. But look, you got Notre Dame going to Ireland in August. Get it done before the Notre Dame Navy game in August in Ireland. Okay, let's celebrate that day. But I do think it's going to get done around that time, and maybe they'll watch the movie footage.
I was going to say we have other elements of Disney to move on to, so not to cut you off. Sorry,
real quick. I got one more. Like I just want real quick to finish this point. What I think Ryan I think Ryan approved. Yeah, let's move this up. They'll shoot the movie. I think he'll watch everything because he's a producer, And then if he feels like there's scenes where he needs to add or ad lib, I think once this writer strike ends, they'll reshoot that scene and maybe he can ad lib there, where he
Yeah, at
feels
that
like
point
it
he'd be
needs
in
to
the
be added
clear.
in.
You also could just do if you can shape it in editing, you can also just do ADR, like as long as it's not when he's not in the costume, you could just ADR it. John, I'll go to you for your quick
Right.
thoughts on the Marvel
Here,
changes.
I'm getting
and then
a
we'll go to the
phone
next
call. I'll be right back.
one. Good.
All right. That's fine. Okay. All right. Okay. Not surprising. They push back, and the strike is pretty much they halted not just like the Disney slate, but maybe some studio films, even the ones that are sort of to an announcement, they were sort of pushing back to it. And this is sort of relates to the Disney release. Like they were just announced that Bradley Cooper and Will Arnett is going to be in the movie together for Searchlight. You know, Searchlight. I was going to say Fox Searchlight, but even though it's not there, they're they're slated to make a movie together, but they can't. They just finished writing a draft right before the strike begins. So Cooper wants to wrote the film, but he can't since the strike is moved on. After the strike is over, he's going to come back and rework it. So kind of like one of those examples along with it. And I kind of sort of the same points. They basically best case scenario strike one like Weaver Day, like September at the least, and basically the last thing the studios wanted, basically they don't want to get let fester around by the upcoming not only more weeks after that or months along of it to the end of the year. It might be the worst case scenario for them, and it causes them maybe no surprise. A lot of money is going to sort of involved with it, regardless of some grievances the studio they have with it. Pay those writers. And basically trying to fix what they need when they fix their working conditions. When the writers they do, they're demanded. You got to get it done at the latest, at least. So it's not surprising there. And also pushing back a bit. Not only they have more time with it, and basically even without the strike, though, I think they just need a little more time to figure out what their priorities have been doing. And I think not only we just mentioned about Blade and Fantastic Four, and I also heard rumblings of the Fantastic Four that they don't want to get they want to get one big name as Reed Richards allegedly was Adam Driver for the suit. They don't want to get a huge name on the actress of it because they maybe too expensive in the ones of it along with it, and I don't think they want to keep it as more of a money machine. And Secret Wars, and basically not only push back, but also we're going to figure out the Jonathan Major situation, how this going to sort of going to happen along with it. So basically, you have to recast him, or basically you have to retool everything and find another big bad to do it. So there's just a lot of factors going into it, and basically, and for some of the pushback and part of the Disney release thing, if you take out like the Marvel stuff, Avatar 3 is going to push back a year later.
Well, you're getting ahead of me. All right.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Like, go ahead.
No, you're good. That's what I was trying to. Yeah. So we'll get to the other. So briefly, I feel like there's not much to say here because I think this one is truly at face value. The Avatar series has redated the three remaining entries. Originally, they were set to release in the Decembers of 2024, 2026, 2028. They'll now drop in the Decembers of 2025, 2029, and 2031. Producer John Landau said, simply put, this is in order to give the VFX artists more time to work on the respective films. 3 is basically entirely shot. They're preparing for production on what is left to be shot of 4. About 25% of the movie is already shot, so they have to shoot the rest of it. 5 they have not worked on yet, but all of the screenplays are already written. So he was clear in his statement, this has nothing to do with the current writer's strike. This is to give us time to finish production and specifically to give the VFX artists the time they deserve to work on the film. I feel like that's pretty straightforward, right? We can just go to the next one.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it's a tradition. Avatar movies being delayed. It's a tradition. Zoe
Absolutely.
Saldana joked, said she's going to be in her, late 50s when Avatar 5
Yeah, like
comes
mid
out.
50s when the last one comes out.
Like 57 or whatever. She's like,
Yeah.
I was like 27 when the first Avatar came out. And that was what, was it 09?
Oh,
Was
nice.
that Avatar 1? So yeah, 2031. That's like 22 years later. So yeah, she'd be no.
Well,
If she was
she probably
27, she'd be 40.
I think she may have been a bit older than that, but So, anyways, so that's pretty straightforward. So next one, following the celebration announcements earlier this year that Star Wars is actively developing 3 new films, the 3 release dates have been set for May 22nd, 2026, December 18th, 2026, and December 17th, 2027. Disney specified that Lucasfilm have not picked which specific films will drop on which specific dates. We are obviously a couple years out from, we're 3 years out from the first one, let alone the rest. And that they'll be dated specifically based on how they move forward in production. Basically, just giving the filmmakers time to work at their own pace and then meeting the dates the later they go in production. Matt, what are your brief thoughts on that?
This is on which one again?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I absolutely do. I would say that out of everybody that's been on this channel in its entirety, I am the biggest fan of Star Wars. There is no need to do 2 Star Wars movies in 1 year. May 2026, December 2026. Why? Just move one to 2028 and have one in 2027. Like, just do that. I don't need it in 25.
To answer your question, as a part of the press statement, apparently the original date for that May film was December 2025, but they gave it to Avatar instead.
Yeah, but then just push the other 2.
Push the other one back.
We don't need 2 movies a year. Just look, because I would assume the first one's going to be Rey's movie. That's what I'm assuming. Probably. It's going to be Rey's. And then that second one's Filoni's. Just put Rey's movie, whenever in 26. Filoni in 27. Give him an extra year.
Specifically, like with Mangold, because Mangold supposedly, before he comes back to Disney to do Star Wars, he's going to do Swamp Thing first for DC. So
and also the Godzilla movie too.
And he's got so there's 2 movies in between. So he's got 5 years, 5.5 years. If you move that to December 2028, that's more than enough time for him to get done what he wants to get done first, and then go into Star Wars. I don't know why they feel the need to rush it. I think you're 100% correct. Don, brief thoughts, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, and going back to there, and if I speculate what is the first Star Wars movie to come out, probably Rey's movie first, and I think it's might be the best speculation of it at this point. And the second one is probably the Dave Filoni movie, and I think I can actually agree with Matt. I think you just need one Star Wars film at a time, along with it. And I get it. I know it's a little tradition you want to have with May, but we saw that last time they tried to do that, and it's not playing well in terms of box office. So I think, as much they wanted to be traditionalist with putting into May, they had to let go on that, and you got to maybe wait till like December, or even though Avatar is not around of it, you could use like one of those even years, basically. Like you could take the Avatar thing, put 1 year, then the Star Wars will take over on the year afterwards. It's kind of like even numbers along with it. You know what I mean by that? So I think they should have done like that.
I will say though, to kind of go to the Star Wars in May not doing great thing, I fully believe there's 2 reasons why Solo bombed. Well, 3. One is because they didn't want to see Han Solo played by somebody that wasn't Harrison Ford, especially when Harrison Ford was in a movie as Han Solo just a few years before. Last Jedi was very mixed in the Star Wars fan community, and a lot of the people that didn't like it just decided we're not going to go see Solo because Disney ruined Star Wars, those people. And then also you had Infinity War come out just, 2 weeks before? So I think if you release a Star Wars movie, well, didn't it come out in May too? Infinity War?
Well, Infinity War got bumped up to the last week of April, and then Star Wars came out Memorial Weekend.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
even you had Infinity War, and that was still doing really,
Infinity
really
War
good.
Was still holding incredibly well.
So, I personally believe if you release a Star Wars movie, maybe not the Rey movie, but Filoni's
that summer
movie
also had
be perfectly.
I was gonna say that summer also had Deadpool 2 come out like the week before or 2 weeks before.
Yeah. So it's like there's a lot of things going against Solo, and there was a lot of people that were just refusing to see it outright. So I think Star Wars can do just as well as any other movie in May.
It depends on what other big movie coming out that if you want to stick with May, that's the thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, you know, you have a lot of big movies. Like Marvel comes out with other big movies in May and still pretty well. Maybe not, but you know, in Phase 3, it was still doing really well. I think Filoni's movie would thrive in May. If you put that May 27 and he release that third one in 28, I think Filoni's would thrive. I think a lot of people would go see it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's fair. Well, I mean, at that point, if you're putting Filoni's in May of 27, then I don't know if you put it in May of 27, I don't know if, because at that point, I guess I don't care if two come out in the same year, because if you're putting it in May of 27, it's still within a 6-month period.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be a
So
year
I don't know.
after.
At that point, I'd
But-
give it. I think the full year is the best option personally, but
Give it a full
But
year.
I will say, I think the one thing that would benefit it, yeah, it'd be 6 months later than what it, you know, what they have it initially coming out on. It would be a year after a Star Wars movie rather than a few, you know, what, 6 months to like maybe even less after the previous Star Wars movie. I think for that movie, it would do better if it came out a year after another Star Wars movie came out rather than if, you know, 6 months after a Star Wars movie came out. That's why I'm saying
Right.
May. It would be perfect.
And so then we'll jump into the last bit of the release date calendar. So the first thing is Disney solidified their 2024 calendar outside of their big franchises. Pixar's next original film, Elio, will drop on March 1st, 2024. I believe that movie also had its first teaser drop this week, although I did not see it. Snow White, the live-action remake starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, will release on March 22nd, 2024. Inside Out 2 was dated for June 14th, 2024, coming out 9 years after the first. Mufasa: The Lion King, the Godfather 2 inspired sequel prequel to 2019's The Lion King, will release on July 5th, 2024. And Disney also announced that Fede Alvarez's Alien movie, which was originally set to be a Hulu exclusive, is now going to theaters and will release on August 16th, 2024. Following that, for future releases, the Moana remake starring Dwayne Johnson was dated for June 27th, 2025. Pixar was given 3 more release dates of June 13th, 2025, March 6th, 2026, and June 19th, 2026. Pixar currently have 4 films in production that are undated. It's assumed that 3 of those movies will take those 3 dates. Toy Story 5 is in active development, as well as 3 films that are original concepts. 2 of them are from debuting directors. 1 is an original concept from director Brian Fee, who is the director of Cars 3. So with that said, of all those movies, Matt, what stands out to you the most out of those?
There's a lot. A lot of Disney movies. Moana sticks out because they shouldn't be happening.
Well, we know that, but
the Snow
I
White
think this
one,
show has made its position clear on Moana.
yeah, shouldn't happen. It's Disney. Stop feeding Dwayne Johnson's ego. Okay, you know what?
Yes.
I'm going to call him The Rock because he'd rather be called Dwayne Johnson, and I'm going to call him The Rock. Don't feed his ego. Stop it. Okay. What movie that isn't a sequel has he done that's made more than $550 million? The answer is 0. 0 movies. He's not the box office draw that people make him out to be. Anyway, Snow White is one I'm actually curious about. I like Rachel and Gal Gadot very much. I really do like Rachel. I think I really hope this is good because I do think she's a very talented actress, and I think Shazam was obviously kind of a hit against her, even though it was a fun little movie, but it was a disaster at the box office.
I don't think she was the
And she's
problem
good.
with that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, she's good, and I think it's a fun little movie. I liked it more than I thought it was going to because I thought it looked
I
bad.
think she needs Hunger Games and this movie to really work for her because she went for years because of the delays. She was just this girl with no CV who Steven Spielberg really liked a YouTube video audition of, and they put her in West Side Story. And then while that was happening, she picked up all these franchise roles. She's in a Disney remake. She was in DC. She's in the Hunger Games. And it's like, this needs to work for you, otherwise it could really backfire on your career.
It could really hurt.
It could hurt.
And look, if these next few movies don't work, and she just starts to not get as many offers, she can go to Broadway, and she'll be perfectly fine. She'll be taken in
Yeah,
Broadway.
she'll make a career there for sure.
She's got the voice to do it, and like she knows people in Broadway. She can just call some people. Hey, can you get a hold of your people? Give me something. But I think Hunger Games is going to be a pretty big hit. Maybe not $1 billion, but I think it's going to be a big hit for the movie it is. But yeah, Snow White really needs to hit. I hope it's good. I really do hope it's good. The
Snow White
Mufasa movie is just wild. It's wild that we're making a Mufasa movie. Mufasa, the Lion King.
Oh, yeah.
You might as well say Mufasa, a Lion King story. It's why? Okay, and it's weird because you got some really good people involved in it too. You got some really talented filmmakers involved, and they were like, "Oh, look, we believe that the Lion King can be a cinematic universe." No, stop it! I don't need to see the Timon and Pumbaa adventure. I don't need to see a freaking Maleficent version of Scar. I don't need this stuff. No. Mufasa's it. Leave it alone. Okay, I get it. The Lion King was a $1.6 billion making film. I don't think people want to see a sequel or really any more movies as much as Disney thinks, because it made that much money. But no, that one's just weird. It's happening because, like I said, you have some really good people involved, and I honestly think Mufasa is going to be a good movie. I think it's going to surprise people because I think you have a better director involved than Jon Favreau. I like Jon Favreau, and like he's made some really good movies. What were the other ones?
Pixar.
Greta Gerwig wrote Snow White.
Yeah, she did, and it's directed by Mark Webb. So I was gonna say, I'll jump in. I'll jump in real quick, and then I'll throw it down to Jonathan. Honestly, since they were announced, those are two of the remakes that have interested me more, because Snow White's directed by Mark Webb, who does have a good track record. It's co-written by Greta Gerwig. She's not the only writer, but it is co-written by Greta Gerwig, which is incredibly intriguing given what we're seeing from Barbie. And it's got good talent in the leads. And then with Scar, or Mufasa, I agree with you. I was kind of like, why does this need to exist? But then it's like they've got Kelvin Harrison Jr. Is portraying Scar, and for anyone who's seen him in anything, he's great. Aaron Pierre, who's he's got more background in television and stage, is playing Mufasa. Yeah. I only recognize him because he played the legendary rapper Mid-Size Sedan in Shyamalan's Old. But with that said, apparently from all accounts, he's very talented. And I do kind of like the idea that Barry Jenkins, best picture winning Barry Jenkins, is like, I'm gonna take the Lion King if it was inspired by Godfather 2, because they recently put out, they confirmed a couple of the cast members are coming back, like Rogan, Eichner, John Connie, who played Rafiki, they're all coming back for this. And the log line for the film is Simba, having become king of the Pride Lands, is determined for his cub to follow in his paw prints. Meanwhile, the origins of his late father, Mufasa, are explored. I love the idea of this being a Godfather-like movie. I want it to be 4 hours. I want full cuts back and forth. This is dope, man.
Kind of like a nature documentary.
It could suck.
Find that random you're gonna find that random animal that struck the killing blow on Mufasa. You're gonna have Simba find him and be
the whole He's gonna go after the wildebeest that killed him.
Yeah, the wildebeest. It's like you did it.
No, hold on. No.
I love you.
It is not just Lion King 2, but with Lion King 1.5 put in. Timon and Pumbaa are a part of the modern story. They are not the prequel part of this. Lion King 1.5 is incredibly entertaining, but it is not the Godfather Part 2.
I'll say it is not Timon and Pumbaa Adventure. That is their movie, and we're gonna get that. we're going to get
Fine.
a
Probably.
movie
And a mystery
with those
science
two.
theater movie, basically, in a mystery science theater type approach.
The last one I'll focus on real quick is shout out to Fede Alvarez for getting his Alien movie into theaters. Like this, like
Yes.
Evil Dead Rise just was an incredible success with I forget the director's name who took over that film, but like that movie was just an incredible success going from theaters to streaming, and like the general consensus last year with Hulu's Prey from Trachtenberg was, I wish this was in theaters. Like fuck, I would have loved to see this in theaters. I hope people support Fede Alvarez's Alien movie because Disney is taking the chance. They are taking a movie that was developed for streaming and putting it in theaters, which means A, I think they believe they have something, and B, they're hoping people go support it. So please go support it, guys. This is not some Ridley Scott's too old to be making an alien film type movie. This is something new and fresh and hopefully quite good.
Yes.
John, I'll give you your thoughts real quick before we move on to the next story overall.
All right. I want to talk about the other part of the release thing you just briefly mentioned is Pixar, real quick.
Sure.
And Pixar right now is a bit of a crossroads. Like, I know you want to talk about box office stuff for next week, though, but Elemental did not track great, basically. Basically got middling, best reviews, tepid at best, along with it. And the box office tried to do it, the last couple of films, just hadn't 100% hit it. So they're hoping that Theo will hopefully get back to it. And basically, and I saw the trailer for it, and I thought it was a very unique construct, and I thought it was weird. And it's from the co-director, Coco, actually. So I'm very intrigued. It might be more deeper emotion of it. And that's why I was saying when I saw the Elemental trailer, and basically I just heard is very good along with it, but not great. And I think they really need a bigger hit. They need to basically get their original movies basically there together. And basically, currently right now in the last few years, they're sort of like third fiddle of animation group right now currently though. They're basically third best when Spider-Verse is dominating basically in the terms of animation, turn the style along with it, and basically they have other studios that are using the Spider-Verse format along with it. Like with DreamWorks, basically we did with Nice Guys and Puss in Boots 2, and basically we see like trailers for the new Ninja Turtles animated film for Paramount. Basically, you're gonna use that little format approach. So basically, ever since Spider-Verse came out, the television animation style is changing, and you also kind of feel like Pixar is sort of lagging a bit because as much as all Pixar films look realistic approach of it, there's certain instances basically kind of look like too real of it. And you know what I mean by that, basically? There's a comment.
What I was gonna say, just because it's a little off of the release date discussion, so I don't want to spend too long. I don't want to spend too long on it, but I'm gonna disagree, and we're not gonna go fully into it just because that's not the point of the show.
Okay.
I've seen Elemental. I have seen it already. Again, reviews, like the consensus is the consensus. I can't argue with that. I thought the movie was excellent personally, and I think anyone out there, because you're not the first person I've heard say that, anyone out there who thinks in any way that Pixar is lagging in terms of animation, go see Elemental because they're not. They're not copying the Spider-Verse style like everybody else is. They're advancing it in their own ways. You can feel how you feel about the story, and that's fine. I personally really loved it. I thought it was really well done. The voice acting is spectacular in this movie from a lot of the characters, especially the lead too. But the animation in this and the way that they portray all these little different everyday things that these elements do while just kind of living this humanoid existence, it shows you that they are not falling behind in animation. They're just not following the trend, which I think is a good thing.
And it's got like an cinema score too.
Just because Spider-Verse was successful doesn't mean every film should copy that style. I don't think every film needs to start looking at that.
And Pete Docter did put out a good quote, kind of because he addressed why some of the Disney animated stuff isn't doing well at the box office lately. And he kind of brought up a point. I think it's part of the reason why they're not doing well. And it's really Disney Plus. When they're releasing all those animated movies onto Disney Plus instead of theaters. He said, hey, like the audiences, they're being trained to know that, hey, this is going to be on Disney Plus anyway. We don't have to rush out and go see it in theaters. Like we can just wait a few weeks and then we'll end up being able to watch it on Disney Plus for free.
Yeah, I was
So
I didn't mean to sort of like rip off, but I was just saying like I haven't had so much discussion like yesterday about it when the box office thing just popped up to it. It is sort of like basically I'm not saying they're not intervening along with it, and this is not my sort of concerns personally with it, but
Mhm.
I'm just saying you kind of sort of feel like basically compared to others is sort of not say lagging a bit. It was just sort of like one step forward and one step behind of it. Some of it. Not to say like they were trying to blend it. Like even Turning Red, they use like a different idea. Both of like use the same idea for the animation for real life though, but not so much as the art direction of it. I think that's a weird core difference along with it. And as far and actually, you think you brought that up with the Pete Doctor quote. That's just basically kind of ever since basically they put like Soul on Disney Plus, which to be fair on Soul's part though, is there's more unfortunate circumstances.
Mhm.
It sort of like basically kind of started at that along with it. If they hadn't sort of like put Turning Red on the streaming, just wait to see that in theater first. Along with it,
Mhm.
I think will be a sort of like a really different story along with it. And
Yeah.
they hope is that Ella might really come back to it. It is sort of a big ass. As from the other Pixar releases, I could tell some of them might be sort of original at this point. And for the sequel to like Inside Out 2, I think Inside Out is basically one of these films that basically could have sort of potential to see like a grow up Riley along with it maturity wise.
Right.
Basically, it took many years
Mhm.
after the first film, and basically said allegedly they happen to with more new emotions along with it. Like, what type
Yeah.
of emotions out there? Like basically, I don't know what type of emotion you could think of basically when you sort of grown up and through
Yeah.
puberty along with it.
Sure.
And although it's a little bit sad that I heard that Minnie King and Bill Heron might not be in the sequel all of it because I like their character so much. And even I don't know if they confirmed that Louis Black is coming back though. It was not. I felt like that was a big mistake on that end. But I felt like you kind of will miss on that part. But I hope it's going to be very intriguing to see how they're going to deal with it. And it's
Mhm.
sort of like it was a good scenario with it, but it's sort of like basically coming back what I pointed out earlier. So that's
Right.
my thing with it, and basically, and that's pretty much just sort of all I can say on it for just one of the Pixar's end of it. And I hope uh same as, and that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. What I think they need to do, Disney, and this people might not think this would help, but I do think this could help them in the long run. Don't put Elemental on Disney Plus next month. Wait until see because it's what June right now. Wait till September, October. Make people wait a long time because maybe you can get that thought in their head of, oh, our kids want to see this. We want to go take the kids to go see this Pixar movie. All the other ones are being released on Disney Plus not too long after they were in theaters, but
Right.
it took a long time for Elemental. Maybe we should go see it in theaters. That way we don't have to wait, for a long time.
The
Like
the
that might help.
pandemic
I don't know.
trained the pandemic trained people to think a certain way, and
Yeah.
so certain of movies are going under the radar because of that. And so I
Mhm.
think that you need to retrain people essentially, or you
Yeah.
need to re-show people. That's why I think Warner Brothers had such a hard time with theaters this year, because like
Mhm.
Warner Brothers spent the better part of 2 years pandering to streaming and pandering to HBO Max, and it backfired on them. It's why they struggled last year, and it's why they've struggled this year.
Yeah.
So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on to for the remaining stories, since a lot of them are smaller. We're going to just jump into the buy or sell segment just because we're further along in the show and I want to be able to get through the other stuff afterwards. So we're going to go on to the buy or sell format. This is, of course, as I've joked, a rip off of the former AMC Movie Talk. I'm going to give you guys the story and I will give you guys a buy or sell. And I want you guys quick, 30 seconds or less, so we can move through these to sort of just give me your buy or sell and briefly why. All right. All right, here we go.
Alright.
So,
Yeah.
During an interview with Variety, Warner Brothers studio heads Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi, Warner Brothers studio heads Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi, during an interview with Variety, which included them giving a mission statement for the studio and taking shots at their predecessor, Jason Kilar, revealed that they wanted the studio to mend the fences with director Christopher Nolan. Nolan left the studio after a falling out with Kilar due to his handling of Warner's pandemic practices. The new head honchos have cited that director relationships are a big focus of their MO, and given the history with the director in the studio, they hope to mend the broken relationship. All sources close to Nolan indicate that he has no interest in leaving Universal for this moment, given how they backed him with Oppenheimer. Matt, buy or sell Chris Nolan reteaming with Warner Brothers?
I will sell for right now, but I think it is definitely possible in 10 years. I think Nolan is like that, he's like that crazy ex who just doesn't forget and just
John,
wants to
buy
make
or
you suffer.
sell? Matt, it sounds like you have experience. You're speaking from the heart there.
I made people suffer.
John,
Jesus.
buy or sell Nolan reteaming with Warner?
Luckily, I don't have that experience in my lifetime because I don't date. I will give it a sell, and my reason is a different one because I bet he's using it as a power move. Think about it. Let's just currently at the moment is with Universal at the moment, and basically let's just say he has another move to the idea, and let's just say shopping it and basically put it to a different studio. Let's just say a Paramount or maybe a Paramount or even a Sony, basically, or even Universal again. Like, I have my film as optioned along with it. I need to get like a little extra dough, a little creatively. Basically, who wants to take it? And I think he's using it as more of a negotiation tactic, basically just saying like, I'm open to do it. Just some people will accept it. So that's my take on that. So
You know how he can really get at Warner Brothers? Have him direct a Marvel movie. That just like, now I'll go back. I'm going to direct a comic book movie after I said I wouldn't do it, but it's not going to be a DC film. It's going to be a Marvel film. What Marvel movie? I don't know. Give him Ant-Man 4. Why not?
this is like basically like where Shane McMahon, like the contract says McMahon, although the contract says Shane McMahon when he buys WCW, do that little power move, do like 2 Trumbulltrons all day, and announce it along with it. Although maybe Fox Searchlight may be also very good work along with it, or maybe an A24 film.
There you go.
All right, so moving on to the next story. Another major director, Guillermo del Toro, revealed this week his intention to leave both the major studio systems and live-action filmmaking behind. Del Toro revealed that he still regularly gets rejected by studios based on his live-action film pitches, whereas overall his time in animation, both currently with Netflix and previously with DreamWorks, has gone much smoother for him. Thus, he plans to abandon live-action filmmaking once his remaining projects are completed and move over fully to animation. For live-action work, he vaguely has a werewolf project and a sequel to Scary Stories Tell in the Dark going, though it's not known if he'll direct either. He may just produce. His furthest along project is an adaptation of Frankenstein, which he is writing, directing, and producing, starring Andrew Garfield, Oscar Isaac, and Mia Goth. He also currently has another animated film in production with Netflix. Matt, John, I'll go down to you. Buy or sell Del Toro moving over to only animation?
I'm gonna buy it, but tentatively, because I felt a little astonishing that a director like Guillermo del Toro, post-Oscar winner, got a little trouble with projects. Like, I just won a Best Picture winner Oscar along with it, and basically I am a top-tier director. Trouble with didn't get at least point of consideration, at least green light sometimes. Maybe you argue with budgets and might be a different type of story, but I felt like it was sort of surprising, a little disheartening for me that Del Toro doesn't even get that opportunity at least, or at least more consideration with it. Maybe cut down some money in terms of budgets, but still, or at least to like other studios might get him that opportunity. Like maybe they could have, I don't know what type of project that he had in mind, or even some lost project that he was trying to get in many years ago. Maybe thought like years had passed, basically had more Will Quatland now since he is an Oscar winner. Basically thought maybe I could have done it, but some reason it just doesn't that work. It doesn't have to be, surprisingly. So it was a little disheartening all of it, but animation work, I'm very intrigued to see like you get back like an animation game, basically. If it's Netflix or a different studio with it.
Matt, buy or sell Del Toro moving to animation?
I buy for 2 reasons. One being it's going to help animation, and I think he's the type of director that can get animation with the Academy anyway to be taken more serious than it is right now. And then also I buy for him because he can do anything he wants, and he doesn't have to worry about spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make the movies he wants to make. He can just do it now in animation. Like there's animation styles where it looks pretty close to live action. Maybe he can do something like that for Hellboy 3. Maybe that's how Hellboy 3 can actually happen. You don't have to worry about Ron Perlman's age at that point, too. So I buy because it's going to help animation be taken more serious. And then also, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants. He's going to have creative freedom, and studios won't have to worry about overspending.
I buy it. Pinocchio is excellent. I've said before, I think the era where he was at DreamWorks in the early 2010s has led to both some of the best work that the studios made and also just in general some of the more inventive work that the studios made. A lot of those singular films that he's behind, I think, are very solid. We wouldn't have a trilogy of Kung Fu Panda films if it weren't for him. We wouldn't have Troll Hunters on Netflix if it weren't for him, which is one of the better things that studios made overall. So I buy it. And also, unfortunately, I buy that he can't get a film made. He did win an Oscar, but unfortunately, Del Toro's career is completely marred with financial failures. Crimson Peak didn't turn, is that what it's called? Crimson Peak? That didn't turn a profit. Hellboy never got made because the second one didn't turn a profit. Pacific Rim only barely turned a profit, and then its sequel did not turn a profit, which is obviously a franchise he started. Just unfortunately, historically, he does not make profits for studios. Nightmare Alley was a failure. I believe The Shape of Water only made money when it won Best Picture. So it's just an unfortunate case of his movies don't sell to the general public. They don't sell in theaters. So going to Netflix, making animation makes sense. Third, buy or sell. Following our discussion on the topic last week, THR confirmed that when speaking to James Gunn, that Andy Muschietti is going to direct Batman the Brave and the Bold for the new DCU following his work on The Flash. He becomes the third director to officially join the DCU following Gunn taking on Superman Legacy and James Gold taking on Swamp Thing. Matt, buy or sell Andy Muschietti directing Batman?
So I haven't seen The Flash. So my answer could change after I see The Flash, but I'm going to buy because I like his other stuff. Besides like It Too, I think he's done a pretty good job. I think the first It is one of the better horror films of like the last 10 years or longer. And this is really, it came out at a time where that genre was putting out some really good movies. And I think it's the best of that time period. I haven't seen The Flash, but he does seem to be a fan of Batman, understand Batman by what I've seen and just how he talks. And, if James Gunn is going to hire him, I do trust James Gunn. And look, he can craft his own thing. I think he had to kind of take things from other directors and writers and kind of combine it and try to make it, the best he can. So I'll buy it. But if I see The Flash before next week and I think it sucks, then I'm going to change it to sell.
John, buy or sell Muschietti directing Batman?
I'm gonna totally buy it. Kind of like with Matt, I need to withdraw my judgment on Brave and the Bold after I seen The Flash. So that's along with it. But for me, with him, I'm intrigued on it to sort of what type of filmmaker he's going to be post Flash. Though, even I was very questioning, like even during the whole Flash experience, what he is going to do as a filmmaker after this. Though, like regardless if people like the movie or not, it's sort of like what he's going to do come back for afterwards though. So because I love what he did with a chapter one though. Like actually speaking of Del Toro earlier, he was founded by Guillermo del Toro, basically become a mentor to him with Mama, the little horror film back in 2013. Sorry, Jackson Chastain. So basically he has talent and potential to become like more in a very unique director along with it. And even though it chapter two for me, it's it got a little bit more bloated and it's some a little CG in the movie is very, very suspect at points. And I think you could tell it's amazing he has a grasp on what certain material he was going for. So I'm gonna more of a tentative buy on that, but maybe might tell what a bit different if I seen the film. It might be changed very rapidly though. Even for Brave and the Bold, because Brave and the Bold basically have Damian Wayne as Robin along with it. So basically he's gonna be, if you know Damian Wayne very well, he's the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul. So basically he's a grandson to Ra's al Ghul. So it might be a very uniquely interesting way to have him in the movie, so I'm more a tentative buy on it.
Overall, I'll buy it. I thought The Flash was just okay. I don't think it's anything spectacular personally. That said, between Keaton and Affleck, I think Batman is the best thing about it. So if he is going to continue directing for DC, I'd rather it be with a Batman film because it seems he at least gets that character. I'm not going to say more than The Flash, just he's already made it the best aspect of the film. With that said, though, speaking of Gunn in DC, he confirmed this week that Xolo Maridueña's Blue Beetle will carry over into the new DCU, despite his upcoming film being a part of the dying DCEU universe. Gunn likes the Cobra Kai actor's portrayal of the character and wants to build on what's established in that film in his own universe. John, buy or sell Blue Beetle being kept over?
I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy what he said though. I think it's basically maybe he. It's just saying about that quote he said. He didn't say like the first DCU movie on there. Maybe he did a little maybe a little swerve. Like it is the first movie DCU movie though. And Blue Beetle, I barely remember Blue Beetle and speak of Brave and the Bold. You know that animated film, like cartoon they used to air on it. That was sort of my first introduction of him. So I found it to be a very unique character doing with it. And I know there are actually comics that Blue Beetle was actually interacted with Superman along with it. So I think he was sort of building up to him. Maybe him and Supes maybe interacted one time with it. So I'm very intrigued on it. And also Blue Beetle, the movie itself, is sort of up in the air basically. So we don't know how the film itself actually would do. So more buy on that.
Matt?
I sell because I have no idea what his thought process is on when it comes to this, because he's saying that Blue Beetle's the first character to go to, be DCU, but the movie is not going to be a part of it. It's going to be Superman Legacy. It's going to be the first one. If this came out before The Flash, I would buy it, because then it's like, okay, well, Flash, it's resetting things, and okay, maybe they could be like, well, Blue Beetle, that unless it takes place before The Flash, but they haven't said if it does or not. So it's like, it kind of confuses me what they're going to do, because if you're not going to include this movie as part of the universe, but the character, then what are we doing? Are you bringing the actor in? Are you bringing everybody in? Are you bringing nobody in? And you're just bringing that character in? What are we doing? So I sell, because James Gunn needs to word it better.
I agree with you there. However, I am going to buy it. There's not much more that I'll say than that. But what I will say is it doesn't do a great job of it, but I think The Flash answers a bit of your questioning, Matt. And that's all I'll say. So I can see where he's coming from with it. And then the last one we have before we'll move on here, Academy Award-winning writer-director of Women Talking, Sarah Polley, is in talks to take over the live-action remake of Disney's Bambi. The film was first announced back in 2020 when Captain Marvel writer Geneva Robertson Dorrit was announced as penning the script. It is believed that Polley will do her own rewrite on the script before it ever goes near production, meaning the film won't move any further during the current strike. Matt, buy or sell Sarah Polley taking over the Bambi remake?
I don't know. She did a good job with Women Talking. But this is really reminding me of the scene in Barry where you had the Coda director directing a superhero movie. And she's like, I did this, I did Coda, now I'm doing this. And it's meaningless and pointless. Buy for Disney because you're getting a good director involved, but sell for her because I don't think this is going to help her career. Why Bambi? And it's gonna be you're gonna have we've seen Lion King, we've seen the Little Mermaid. You're gonna see Bambi's mom get shot, and Bambi with no reaction. She's just gonna stand there, and you're gonna hear no, and she's going to look like a deer and have no emotions. Why? Look, I can understand doing Hunchback of Notre Dame. I can understand doing Snow White, because at least your lead characters in the movie are human. Even Jungle Book, the lead character was human. Bambi, it's like a fucking rabbit and a fucking deer. The only human is gonna be the guy who shoots Bambi's mom. That's it. Unless they make their faces more animated to where you can have some facial features and emotional features to the face. So I buy for Disney because you're getting a talented person, but I sell for her because do something else. Don't do Bambi. Do like a, I don't know, if you're gonna do a big blockbuster, do something like The Rock or, well, The Rock, it's not a big moneymaker. Do like a comic book movie or something if you're gonna get into this, not Bambi.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in before I go down to John there quickly. I'm going to buy for the exact opposite thing that you just said. I think that no, seriously though,
Okay.
I think if you're going to be an indie director that transfers over to one of these films, I think a live action remake where you may get a bit more creative freedom makes way more sense than doing a blockbuster, right? It's the same thing as Dean Fleischer Camp doing Lilo and Stitch after doing Marcel the Shell, right? I think that makes way more sense than like Chloe Zhao doing Nomadland and then jumping into Eternals, or even worse, technically the order was doing The Rider, then Eternals, and then Nomadland, and then continuing Eternals was the order that really happened in. I think this makes way more sense. I think doing a live action remake, you'll get more creative control. I think clearly her strong suit is emotional writing. I think that was the strong suit of Women Talking, is it played on the emotional points of the film really, really well. Bambi's a very dialogue heavy movie. There's a lot of discussion happening in this 1940s animated film, where the pinnacle of it is you get to see Bambi's mom die. So if it's going to have to be, yeah, see, and I'm going to do it here. I'm going to pull up the comment because he just went exactly right.
I like Eternals. Damn it.
He brought up
I
Eternals.
like it.
I don't think it's horrible, but I think that Eternals is a case of you're in an embedded universe that already has a feel, and you're so against the grain that to me it didn't work. Whereas with this, there's nothing to compare it to. Like I can name more of them. Craig Gillespie did I, Tonya, and then he did Cruella. That's one of the better films. Favreau did Chef. And he's done more indie films like that before he took over. He'd done Iron Man, obviously, but he has an indie background. He did The Jungle Book. That was excellent. Kenneth Branagh, Shakespeare, indie films. His blockbusters, look at Thor, look at Jack Ryan. Those don't work. But Cinderella, great film.
Thor did. Thor worked. I love Thor. I think the first Thor is the second most underrated MCU film. The second most underrated.
Well,
I think the most underrated is Incredible.
We can agree to disagree there, but the point stands that I think that these films are actually a better outlet for these indie directors to have potentially more freedom than an MCU film. An MCU film will do more for your name, sure. But I think creatively you get more to do within these movies.
But there's a difference between like Bambi and then, you know, all like Jungle Book and Cruella and, you know, those movies you listed. And, you know, the difference is like Jungle Book, mostly, you know, animals, but your lead was a human character. A lot of the leads in those movies were human characters. I think when you do just live action CG where you really try to make everything look as real as possible and it's all animals, I think when you lose the emotional element, unless they're going to change their way and make, you know, Bambi have a little more of an animated, not completely animated, but the face looks a little more animated so you can have the emotions be shown. Unless you do that, your Bambi's already taken a hit because you're losing the emotional.
I agree with you. I agree with you there. But on paper, if we're talking about just the singular aspect of what helps their career more potentially, on paper, I think you get more creative freedom in how you can write this film. And I think that if she can nail this and if this turns out good, I think this helps her career more than her jumping into doing a Marvel film, right? And the thing is, Disney has been taking this direction more and more with these films. Because, like, think about it, like The Little Mermaid was put into production years ago. It took years to make that, right?
Yeah.
But like recently, Cruella had Craig Gillespie. That's more of an indie approach. If you look at Peter Pan and Wendy, they brought back David Lowery. That was more of an indie approach. If you look at Dean Fleischer Camp taking over Lilo and Stitch, if you look at like some of the others, I forget the gentleman's name, but the guy who did Blind Spotting is involved with one of these live action remakes now. I believe his is The Sword and the Stone. And so this is the approach they're taking now. They're bringing in these more indie directors. And I think overall, I think it'll start to breed better results. Now, again, if you want to argue the concept of the CG, sure, it could go horribly. But I think in terms of just their careers helping them, it'll do more for them. John, I'll go down to you for your thoughts quickly before we move on. Go ahead.
Oh, hold on. Breaking news. Breaking news. We got a first look at Bambi.
Here we go.
We got a first look at Bambi, guys. Oh my gosh, here we go. Look at that. Bambi. That's the scene where the mom dies. And that's Bambi's reaction. That's the reaction.
I just want to see the corpse with all the pellets in it, damn it. Fuck the reaction. I want to see that body.
We won't see that. We won't see that. Look, and I agree. If this ends up hitting, it's really gonna launch your career, because you're making a Disney live action movie that a lot of people like. That's gonna really help, because that would be like the first one where it's universally liked since, like, I don't know. It's been a while, because we've had some pretty bad ones lately. But yeah, I agree. If she knocks out a park with this, I do think it's really going to help, because I think that would make a lot of people go, "Oh wow, she's actually a really good director. She's able to do that."
Right. John, your thoughts?
I was gonna say, I'm gonna buy it for her career trajectory, but I'm gonna sell this project. So that's my thing with it. And I'm also gonna say, like, I hope maybe if they were gonna make it, and basically, I hope her color palette is kind of like the similar way women talking, though. Like, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, involving the color palette. Basically, it's just vaguely any colors in the movie, though. It's sort of like very dry, very saturated spaces along with it. So that's what I picture in my head what her Bambi movie would look like. And I'll just put a whatever on it, I'll be honest with you. And this might sort of sell along with it. I think she's a very talented director, and I felt like it was a little bit more than that, honestly, for me, but I would just want my attentive sell.
Fair enough. All right. Well, with that said, guys, we're going to go ahead and move into the film discussion here. Jonathan, of course, you have not seen the film yet, so you're going to bow out at this point. But I appreciate you being here for the news, sir. Happy to have you on, and we will absolutely get you on a little in the future when we have either more news to discuss or something to watch. So we will have you back on. But I did want to have you here, since it's a smaller show tonight, to discuss the news with us, at least, since you've been supportive of the show. We want to at least get you on a first time. So thank you, sir, and we will see you next time. Take care of yourself.
See you, fellas. Good night.
All right. So we'll go ahead and jump into listen, we can have all the discussions in the world about Disney, but I just have to say, Chris, you are preaching to the opposite of a choir. It is all about the money. No one cares about the quality over at Disney.
Yeah,
they want to make money, baby.
Yeah, Disney doesn't care about quality as long as it makes money.
They are Mr. fucking Krabs.
Yeah.
They'd buy Mr. Krabs if they could.
Yeah, and to be fair, every big studio is like, look, I don't care how bad this movie is, if it makes us money,
fuck it.
The success
we're going to talk about Transformers. That is the king of if it sucks, it'll still make us money. So, but anyways, with that said, we'll jump into it. This is the official issue of a spoiler warning. If you have not seen Transformers Rise of the Beast, from here on out, we're going to be talking full spoilers. So tune out, come back once you've seen it, and once this ticking banner is gone at the bottom. That said, to sort of introduce the film, Transformers Rise of the Beast rode into theaters last weekend and generally pleased audiences. Anthony Ramos stars as Noah Diaz, an ex-soldier who struggles to support his family and ends up on the adventure of a lifetime when his attempts to steal a nice-looking Porsche lead to him being exposed to the Transformers, who are attempting to return to Cybertron after being stuck on Earth for the last 7 years. When a beacon is activated that brings Unicron to Earth, Noah and his Autobot allies team up with the Maximals to stop the simultaneous destruction of Earth and Cybertron. The film, which serves as a standalone sequel to Bumblebee, is set up to be the first of a planned trilogy, which will also include a universe crossover with G.I. Joe. Stephen Cable Jr. directs the film, his first since 2018's Creed 2, from a script written by a writer's room led by Joby Harold, best known for his contributions to Obi-Wan Kenobi. The voice cast features possibly the most star-studded voice cast of the series, including voice acting legends like Peter Cullen, Ron Perlman, John DiMaggio, and David Sobolov, and the celebrity cast including Pete Davidson, Michelle Yeoh, Ted Lasso's Cristo Fernandez, and Peter Dinklage, and Coleman Domingo as the film's villains Scourge and Unicron. Dominique Fishback and Luna Lauren Velez co-star as the human side characters. So go ahead
real
and
quick.
jump into
I'm
it.
gonna ban Chris for booing Kenobi.
Is that what the
I'm gonna
boo
boo
is
him.
for? Booing
Yeah,
Kenobi?
that
Okay.
is because it was a good show. Damn it, it was a great fight between Vader and Obi-Wan.
All right.
Better
So
than
Matt,
episode 3.
we'll start with you. What are your brief thoughts on the film before we jump into it a little more?
Went into it not really expecting much because you kind of hinted at the fact that this movie was a disaster during production at times.
Oh,
So
okay.
it kind of
He
made
was booing G.I. Joe.
Oh, okay. Good. You can stay. You're probably lying, but I guess I'm gonna watch it carefully over the text, not anyway else. Anyway, so yeah, we're not gonna go to your house and watch you like Santa Claus. Anyway, so went into this movie not really expecting much. I was like, look, if this movie's good, awesome. But but at first I was expecting, yeah, this movie's gonna stink. Then I saw some people go, hey, this is actually not too bad. Then I went in like, okay, I don't know what to expect. Maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. And I had fun with this movie. I enjoyed it, had a good time. Wasn't fantastic, wasn't as good as Bumblebee, but easily the second or third best of the Transformers movies. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it was fun. When I think it was in the middle when they get to Peru or whatever, and the other Transformer comes in and start talking. It's like, is that Danny from Ted Lasso? Is that Danny Rojas?
It absolutely
And I had
is.
to look it up after, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it is Danny. I didn't know he was in it. That's awesome. That really surprised me. But no, I had fun, and of course the end. I like the end. I getting G.I. Joe is something a lot of people that grew up with Transformers, in the 80s and 90s, that's what they wanted. They wanted that crossover to happen. They're finally getting it. And it makes sense because it's happened in a comic run. I don't think it happened in cartoons. I don't know anyway. I know it happened in a Marvel run. I know they did a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover. But this is like kind of what a lot of people in the 80s want. They played with their G.I. Joes and Transformers together. The only thing that would really take it over the top is if you have He-Man crossover. So you have He-Man, Transformers, and G.I. Joe.
Is that the
'cause
post-credit
that would
scene
be
for
the
the
ultimate
second film?
80s.
He-Man ascends from space.
You just hear, I have the power. No, it's going to end like Spider-Verse, where it's going to be a big cliffhanger. It's going to be this big battle, and they're starting to like really struggle, and you hear, I have the power, and then credits.
Cut to black.
No, this is what a lot of, like, my dad grew up with Transformers, G.I. Joe. You had G.I. Joe's, Transformers, your other things play together. That, having those two crossover is like, being a kid from the 80s playing with your G.I. Joes and Transformers, and you have them all going together. I think it could be cool. I know DS is not particularly happy that they're doing it because he did not like the last 3 G.I. Joe movies, but I will say that this will have nothing to do with those G.I. Joe movies. This will be different. And, look, if it ends up sucking, then guess what? You don't have to watch it ever again. You can just focus on other stuff.
To give my brief thoughts on the film, I'm kind of in line with you. I thought it was a good time. I'm somebody who's not a big fan of any of the Bay films. I know a lot of people will defend the first one, and I think it's okay. Yeah. But I think in one swoop, Stephen Cable Jr. made a better Bay Formers film than Bay ever did, quite frankly. I think that this takes the best elements of the better Bay films, which is keeping the Transformers group small, don't blow it up too much, because I don't want to read like Revenge of the Fallen, I think, is the worst of it, because outside of Prime and Bumblebee, the only characters in that film that are get any kind of memorable moment because there's so many of them, are the big ass jet, which wasn't a positive thing, and Skids and Mudflap, because they are very, very clearly meant to be Michael Bay's interpretation of a black man, which is not good. That and
As
whichever
Campio would say, "Hood, no, not gonna do it."
that and whichever Transformer. Listen, I'm just saying, not that Michael Bay is any kind of racist, but if you have a Transformer with that accent and a gold tooth say things like "pop cap in his ass," clearly you are trying to insinuate something. That said, also the Transformer that has the testicles. I don't know which Transformer had the testicles, but one of them had the testicles, and that image of those two balls just clanging is forever in my mind.
Just clanging together.
Shout out to the writer's strike. With that said, I think this movie overall is better than any Bay film ever. It is more of a Bay film than it is a Bumblebee. It's not a deep character study. It does have a Transformers group in it. That said, of all the human protagonists, and I'd argue maybe even Haley Steinfeld in Bumblebee, I think with Anthony Ramos' character, they have found a protagonist who is the most relatable in any of these films, with Haley Steinfeld being the only competition. And he's also the person who makes the most sense as a protagonist, because one of my biggest gripes with these movies is it seems like no matter who they bring in, very quickly they figure out how to fight an Autobot war. Like, Mark Wahlberg especially was the worst. Like, before you're at the halfway point in that fourth film, he's picking up Autobot guns and firing them, and it is just like, you're a mechanic. How the fuck do you know how to work that?
Whereas hey there, Bumblebee, watch out. Hey there, Megatron, look what I got here.
By establishing that he is both A, ex-military, and B, good with technology, well, you don't get a lot of time to see it. It at least gives you something. It at least gives you something that this guy could throw on a Power Ranger suit and be effective. I think that I do think this is some of the better human stuff in any of these films. I do think that the Transformers had individualistic personalities, which I appreciated. I thought some of the voice work was really, really good in this. Obviously, the voice actors, the people who do this on the regular basis, were all very, very good. But you're right. It's a small part, but Cristo Fernandez from Ted Lasso, I thought was a cool, unique type of Transformer we haven't seen before. I thought that Pete Davidson plays a good Bumblebee, because that's what he is in this film. Mirage is kind of filling the Bumblebee role, and Bumblebee is filling the Autobot soldier role, but he plays a good Bumblebee. Him and Anthony Ramos have good chemistry. I thought Michelle Yeoh did a great job for what she was in the film, because she's not in it very long, but I thought she did a good job with her character as well. I think the weaknesses are just, it's what carries over from the Bay films. At the end of the day, I think you can only do one or the other. I don't think you can do a film where you can fully invest us in the humans and fully invest us in the Transformers. I think some or both are going to eat it in some way. In this film, I think it's the antagonists. If I didn't know it was Peter Dinklage voicing that guy, I wouldn't have ever guessed. Same thing with Coleman Domingo as Unicron. There's no need to bring in these actors for these roles because they're not adding anything to it. The villains are quite bland. They were just bad guys to fight. That could have been Megatron, and I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. The Maximals at least were different, but these were the Terracons, I think they were called. They're not Decepticons.
I think so, yeah.
They were called Terracons. And again, I wouldn't know the difference between a Decepticon and a Terracon, and hell, even a Dinobot, outside of the fact that they look like dinosaurs. They're just all so generic that, who cares?
Bad guys, just, you don't even have to say which one it is, and you'd be like, yeah, those are the bad guys.
Those are the bad guys.
It's Decepticons. It's all good.
Yeah, so we'll jump into it a little deeper. So first off, what are your thoughts on the action in this film overall? Because there are, and for what it's worth, there was at least one major set piece cut from this film. If you guys have followed the show, we discussed previously that this movie went through some post-production issues. It did. So, what are your thoughts on the actual action that was left in the film?
I think it was fun. It's for a little bit. It was just like your standard action. It wasn't anything special. But that final fight, I thought was really well done, really well shot. Um, Liked it quite a bit. It's not going to be the best action of the year. I haven't even seen it yet, but I'm assuming based on what I've heard, Extraction 2 is going to have the best action in any movie this year, just with how it's shot and all that stuff. But good action. The final fight, final battle, I thought was really, really good. Definitely felt like that type of action sequence you would see in like the Bayformers, which I will say, three's not great, but the action three is so good. The Battle of Chicago is so good. That was perfect. That's like perfect Michael Bay stuff.
3 might be the second best, just because the action is a step up from the rest.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it's okay.
I don't want robot testicles in my film.
I don't need
an Asian man named Deep Wang, I'll take any day of the week.
I don't need no testes in my Transformers movies. But no, action was better than I thought it would be. Action, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Did what it needed to do. It was fun.
Yeah, and what were your thoughts on like the human element of the movie?
It wasn't bad. I liked the performances, mainly from Anthony Ramos. I just don't think you really need much human interaction, human story in Transformers movies. I just want to watch a Transformers movie about Transformers. Yeah, if you want to have humans in it because it's on Earth, do it, but don't have that be a major part of the story. Like the girl in the movie, like she wasn't bad. I think she was in Spinning Gold. It's kind of where I recognized her from. If I'm mistaken, I apologize. But
I know she was in a couple years ago. She was in Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
She played Hank girlfriend in that film.
Yeah, so maybe that was the movie, not Spinning
Gold. I never saw Spinning Gold, so I don't know.
It's not bad. It's pretty solid. But my thing is, that's not her. There we go. Okay. Anyway, but no, she wasn't in it. She was in Swarm. That's probably what I recognize.
Oh, the Glover show.
Yeah. Like she was good in the movie, but like outside of the museum stuff, I didn't really think she needed to be in it. She was literally just a plot device in the movie. Like, hey, I know this thing. Like she's only in the movie because she like knows how to translate a couple things, or she remembers a couple things, and that's really it. I don't really need the human stuff. Like, yeah, it wasn't bad in this movie. Like the actors are good. They did what they needed to do. But there's no point in having human stuff in Transformers movies. Just give me Transformers.
I think at this point everyone needs to accept that it's not going to happen.
They just think that you got to have humans.
It's incredibly ironic because probably the best Transformers film we've had is the one that had the most human element in it. Not the most characters. That's definitely one of the Bay films because he'll just like Dude, the fifth one was the worst, where it's just like randomly like Gerard Carmichael shows up, and it's like, why the fuck is he in this?
Like Anthony Hopkins. Look, that movie is hot trash, but Anthony Hopkins did not care. He did not care, but he was having so much fun. He was making probably $30-40 million, and he just did not care. He just was like, I'm gonna have fun. He's like, I'm buying another house with this money in Scotland. And you know what? I respect that. The only Bumblebee is like the one with the human stuff. Right. That's like the one movie where like, yeah, that makes sense because of what that movie is. But look, I know the studio thinks, hey, we gotta have humans in it, so there's that connection. No, like we can connect to robots. Like we've connected to animals in the animated Lion King movie. We've connected to things that aren't humans as the main device. Like Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
There you go.
Like, no, Lion King is a great example because it's literally just animals, but we all connect to it emotionally, and we don't need humans to push that story.
Oh yeah, there's an original. Sorry.
Yeah. Like we were able to follow it and be fine. Not the live action. Live action's the
That was
same
where my
thing.
head went. I was
It's
like, what?
live action. But like, we don't need to have the human element in the movies. Like, yeah, have some humans in it, sure, for a little bit, but give us Transformers, the movie about Transformers. Okay, the next one's obviously gonna have humans because of GI Joe. That would make sense because it's GI Joe. That makes
Right.
sense to have a human element to it.
And
But
for,
like,
for what it's worth, my take on the GI Joe thing, I'm not even convinced that they're going to have a bunch of the recognizable characters in these movies. Like, I don't think they're going to go so far as to bring like Snake Eyes into a Transformers film. I don't think that's what this is going to be. I think they're simply going to use GI Joe as a replacement for Sector 7, which is what the
right.
established government facility was in all the other films. I think they're just going to replace Sector 7 with GI Joe, and then they can spin off from it if they want, and hopefully with the right writers and direction, take it in a better place.
I think they're gonna have.
I think you're better. I think you're better served implementing GI Joe into this trilogy, and then doing a spin-off where maybe one or two Transformers are a part of Joe versus stuffing Joe into a Transformers film. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying. I think they're gonna have the recognizable. I mean, if you're gonna have GI Joe and you want to bring audiences in, I think what the audiences that, especially the ones that were around in the 80s and love GI Joe and Transformers, the cartoons and stuff, I think those people especially be really pissed if you didn't have the GI Joe, like the well-known characters. Like, I want to see Snake Eyes and Optimus Prime on screen together. That's what I want to see, and I think that's what a lot of people want to see too. Because like, at that point, why do GI Joe if you're not going to have the actual GI Joe in it? Why not have them in it? This is a perfect opportunity to do that crossover. Why not?
Sorry, if anyone's watching, the private chat at this point is partially just Chris Diaz, who's with us live, going off on GI Joe. Dude, those movies they're not good, but they're not that bad.
The Snake Eyes movies. The Snake Eyes movie was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
But it's not.
The Channing Tatum ones were fine. Like, they weren't terrible.
It's not bad enough to be worth like the feeling. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of dull me.
Snake Eyes is pretty close
because I think this is why this film handled the human stuff the best, right? Basically, do you wish it focused on the brother stuff more than having the girl there? I think no, because what on earth would you have done with the brother? If you're constantly having him radio back home, I just think that dilutes from the film. I think they did it perfectly by saying Mirage is in contact with him and having him communicate to him that way. I think that one moment at the end was more than what you needed. It was more than enough. And then vice versa, I think you're right. I think like in previous films, this girl would have been a love interest. This girl would have been a part of the action, like fighting. This girl would have been, she would have had like a driving scene like they've done with Megan Fox in the past. Like, this girl would have been a part of it. But instead, she is more of kind of just a passenger. She's there, similar to Anthony Ramos's character, because she's useful to the situation, and she's not much more involved in it than that. And like, they give her a little bit of character. They give her a scene with Anthony Ramos because he's the lead, but they don't like dive into her background a whole lot. They don't set her up as a love interest. They don't, you know what I mean? Like, even things like her reaction to Airazor's like turn and then subsequent death. Like, clearly she formed a connection with her, but in the other films, you'd have as many scenes of her and Airazor as you would have had with Ramos and Davidson's characters. Whereas here, it's just like through the acting, you see that a connection was made and this is affecting her, and that's it, right? And I think that's where this movie handled the spoiler stuff better, because the humans are there. I do think the humans need to be a part of it. I think that, especially because these are just CG characters, I think that this could go really wrong really quickly, especially because there's not enough unique personalities out there to put on all these characters. I think there needs to be a human element to it, but I think this handled it the best because they were only one was really focused on, and the rest were all briefly in and out, or in her case, she was a part of it as much as she was needed for the plot.
Right.
And I think that is like the handling of it. That's how it should be handled from here on out, right? Like, I think in the next one, I think you should bring Ramos back. I personally believe you should bring him back. He should be in the next one. But I don't think you need to bring her back. And I think if you put any other humans in it, make it a similar case of somebody who's there because they're useful, but they're not the focus. Because, like, think about the other films, right? Like, think about, like, Bay's first Transformers film, right? You had Witwicky, you had Megan Fox's character, but then diving into Witwicky's life, you also had his parents, and then you had, like, she had a boyfriend, I think, in that film, and then there's the whole Josh Duhamel and Tyrese Gibson and the soldiers, and then Duhamel's wife, and then there's Anthony Anderson in the CIA building with the fucking donut, and it's like, at a certain point, it's like, Totoro, you're right, I totally forgot about him in those movies.
It's not hard to forget.
Well, by the third one, you see him in a jock strap, so I guess you're right. It isn't hard to forget.
That's true.
But
I guess that's true.
So, like, those film, what is it with Bay and just genitals in those movies? Anyways,
look, he's a perverted man. He loves ass and he loves testes. That's what he loves.
Ass.
He loves it.
Here, so I'll use this as a talking point real quick as we'll start to wrap up. Do you think they should bring back Haley Steinfeld? Because that's what Diaz threw out there. Bring Ramos and Steinfeld. I don't think they should.
I don't think they need to bring her back based on where it looks like they're going. As far as the human thing, the ones that I think you would need to have a, pretty good to, pretty big size role would be Anthony Ramos and the G.I. Joes. You don't need anybody else. Maybe the brother. You can have the brother and his mom. You can have them be in it for a little bit. Brother would probably be in it a little bit longer because there's kind of a connection with Mirage and him. But, like, you don't need anybody else. There's really no need for Haley Steinfeld to be in this movie because, it's probably, 7 to 10 years after Bumblebee.
Yeah, so I was that's where I was going to go. Like, for starters,
maybe a cameo, but that'd be about it.
I would say, like, maybe, so, like, if this is a trilogy, and let's say the trilogy ends with, like, the Transformers accepting that they'll be on Earth for the remainder of their existence and this is their new home, maybe get a cameo at the end of the third film. Bumblebee goes back to her. Like, maybe Bumblebee goes back to her so you can get a cameo that way. But yeah, other than that, I don't think you need to force her back in because, and again, it's one of the things I did like about Bumblebee, because again, my thing with those Bay films is people who should not be there are always at these things and they're useless. And Bumblebee goes out of the way to take her out of the action until the third act, where she forces herself in out of her care for Bumblebee. Up until that, she's not in any of the action. And the movie ends with Bumblebee leaving her behind to leave her out of what's to come. So I don't think you need to. I think we should just bring Ramos back. And then, yeah, if you want to add some Joe, sure. That's fine. Cool.
I just, like, if they didn't have the G.I. Joe connection at the end, I would just say bring Anthony Ramos and maybe, like, his brother and mom back. And that'd really be about it. But since they did tease the G.I. Joe at the end, that to me, I feel like if you're going to tease it, you might as well have G.I. Joe in it. And then Anthony Ramos has to play a big part in it because, he's probably going to be a part of the G.I. Joe by the looks of it. So that's all. If that's it, like I said, G.I. Joe wasn't tagged at the end, you don't really need anybody else than Anthony Ramos and his brother. So,
fair enough. So as we,
like I
as
said,
we
maybe
start
Haley
to wrap
Steinfeld
things,
at the end. Maybe like Haley Steinfeld gets cameo in the third movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that happens. But that'd be as far. And plus, she should be old enough to where she could play somebody that would, be, I don't know, like it would probably be about 10 years after Bumblebee, 10 to 12 years. She probably would fit that age range, and she would probably look a little more like, she's a little bit older than just a kid.
True. So we'll go ahead and start to wrap this up. As we
No,
move
Chris, we're
into-
not going to have the GI Joe recruit Haley Steinfeld in the movie. I mean, look, it's not a bad idea, but that just I think that's a bad idea. Now,
Haley
I just don't think it
Steinfeld
makes sense.
Haley Steinfeld has enough franchise options. She's a
Yeah,
part of
let her be
Marvel.
Gwen.
She's got the Spider-Verse trilogy. She does not need this.
Let her be Gwen, and then let her move on and do some other stuff for like Apple. You know, she had a show for Apple. Let her do something for Apple again. I don't know. Not Transformers. She's fine.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to wrap this up. So we'll go ahead and get to the scores and then any wrap up and final thoughts here, because I think we've hit on as much as we can. There's really not a lot to talk about in terms of like the movie itself. It plays out kind of as generally as you think it would. There's not a lot to it. So we'll throw up the scores here as we wrap this up. I settled on a 6.5 out of 10. Matt just above me at a 7.5. I think overall the consensus we reached is it's good, not great. I think for the visual spectacle alone, I do think it's worth seeing on the big screen. If for some reason you're still here and you haven't seen it already, I think it is worth seeing on the big screen. I think that the first off, the visual effects in it, as always with these films, are quite good. They need to be in order for this to work, and I think they do come through. The movie does look really, really good, especially for having more Transformers than the last film at the very least. I think the human performances are some of the best in the series. Not perfect, but I think it works better than it has ever before outside of Bumblebee. I think you lose a bit of the human element that Bumblebee had in terms of the emotional connectivity, but I think that that's made up for by being the most fun action film that any of these have been. And I again, like the character stuff works. When a twist happens, it gets you. You know what I mean? Like I think maybe the only big thing we didn't talk about left is there's obviously we talked about the briefly the Air Razor thing where they introduced this Maximal as an ally and she's slowly corrupted and then has to be killed when she attacks them. But also at the conclusion of the first act, they kill Bumblebee and he's not in most of the movie until they get to the third act. And these twists worked. Like there was no part of me that thought, oh, Bumblebee's dead. Like they're not bringing him back. They're going to bring him back. But it worked in the moment. And I think that that's an upgrade for me compared to previous films. What are your wrap-up thoughts?
I enjoyed the movie. It's a good movie. It's a lot of fun. You know, better than what I thought it was going to be. In all honesty, thought Anthony Ramos did a good job in this movie. Outside of Haley Steinfeld, I think he was my favorite human character, which is not really a high bar. You know, with Shia LaBeouf and Marky Mark and and all that fun stuff, and the whole hey, I guess my daughter's going to date a guy that's 7 years older than her, even though she's underage. But hey, Romeo and Juliet lost. Good movie. Enjoyed it. Had fun. I thought Peter Dinklage was good in the movie. Like he said, they wanted somebody that could have a voice as low as he can get his to be. Like that outside of like adding the robotic stuff to him, that was his voice. Like he was that low, which was pretty cool. Pete Davidson, I thought was quite good in this movie as Mirage. I liked Mirage in general. Kind of pointed out some of the silly things that were happening and kind of spoke about it. It was kind of fun how they did that stuff. Action really good, like the final fight sequence especially. Not too big on Anthony Ramos becoming a Power Ranger at the end. I wasn't too big on that per se. Kind of looked a little silly.
There's your GI Joe, bro. We're gonna put him in the costume.
Yeah, he's going. That's him and Mirage will now do that. It's gonna be the one thing I dread seeing. But no, it's a fun movie, and I think it sets up something that could be a lot of fun, and I think a lot of 80s kids are going to really like what they have coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, again, that is our thoughts on Transformers. If you have not seen the movie, again, I don't know why you're still here, but go check it out. It is a lot of fun. And I think that there's a lot for people to enjoy. So with that said, titles can be easily adjusted. Despite the fact that I said we had a new segment, we are at an hour 53. We did go a little over on the new segment there. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to wrap up? And we'll save it for another week.
Let's keep going. I have the list already.
Okay,
Might
all
as
right.
well.
All right, so we'll truncate it a little bit, just because I feel like recently there's been a lot of talk about this. I know I can truncate myself just because I did this on another show, but we're introducing a new segment here, which is keeping in the theme of stealing segments, as we've jokingly said, with the buy or sell concept. Saving this more for weeks where there's not a lot going on in terms of movie discussion or movie news, similar to this week. Transformers, unfortunately, we did try and get other people on. We reached out to certain areas of people, trying to also fill in guests that we haven't had on the show yet. And unfortunately, just a lot of people hadn't had a chance to see Transformers. Not a priority for a lot of people. So fair play. That is what it is. But also not a lot
Comes
of
out in
crazy
November.
movie news. Just a lot of the same rumor mill running that we've heard already. And so
Yep.
the concept that we're stealing is essentially the top 10 show. Because I think it'd be fun. Matt and I, off camera, we've discussed movies a ton, and we have it back and forth. And so I thought, okay, if we're going to take something else that's dead, let's take the top 10 show. And so with that said, we're going to be doing Spider-Man films is the theme of this. So for anyone who never saw the top 10 show, which again, I'm totally admitting that we're stealing, but fuck it, who cares? The concept of that show, each person on the show, myself and Matt, have put together a list of our top 10 best Spider-Man films. And for what it's worth, we're doing all theatrical Spider-Man related films. So that means any of the spin-offs are eligible. That also means any of the non-MCU films are also eligible. And so with that said, basically anything where Spider-Man has some sort of presence felt is what we're focusing on. And so with that said, we're going to do this just like the top 10. So I will start with, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll let you start. I
Okay,
really
so
wanted to
I'll
have
do-
Daredevil versus Spider-Man. Couldn't have that on there. Spider-Man
Yeah, it
Strikes
didn't
Back
go.
also cannot be on my
So
list.
I will do my bottom three. Matt will do his bottom three. Then I'll do 7-6, his 7-6, and then we will trade back and forth all the way to our number ones. In the event that we say a film that is higher up on somebody else's lists, we will simply say punt, and we will come back to the discussion once we get there. All right. So with that said, I will start with my number 10. And this was a toss-up between three films I don't love, but I think this is the best quality overall of the three films, which is Venom: Let There Be Carnage.
I forgot he had a little bit of a presence in that. I don't have that on my list, and it wouldn't have been on my list anyway.
Yeah, so with that said, Venom: Let There Be Carnage is my number 10. Which is weird that it makes the top 10 for me. I've said before, this film frustrates the ever-loving shit out of me because I think that if they took this movie a bit more seriously with the cast they have, with the talent behind the scenes that they have, they could have made a really great Venom film. And I think that about both of these movies, but this one more so even because you have Woody Harrelson and Naomi Harris playing roles that are perfect for them as actors. That said, it is just trying to be a fun, dopey 90s superhero film, and it, I guess, succeeds at that. I don't know. What else can I compliment? I didn't mind the Venom comes out scene. Like, the gay pride parade was fun.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy is
That was
entertaining, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's about all I'll say. That's my number.
Yeah, for me, it wouldn't have been on my top 10. I think this should have been rated R. And there was a video that came out where it was some of the concept art of Venom 2 with Carnage in a prison breakout scene where, clearly it would have been a graphic, violent scene. And I saw that, I was like, this, Andy Serkis said, he didn't want the violence to overshadow the movie. That's kind of what Carnage is, and that kind of fits his character. And I think that hurt the movie. It was more in line with the first Venom movie. It felt like a 90s comic book movie. Like the first one, I think it's fun. Second one's not as fun, but I don't think it's like a terrible movie by any means.
I liked it slightly more. It's a 6 to a 5.5. I don't think either are great. That said, my number
it's
9
fine
is Spider-Man 3.
Okay. It's not on my list.
That's fair. I've said before, and again,
Yeah.
I won't spend too long on each of these movies. Last week, I'll plug the channel over on Take 3. Malcolm Lay, of course, friend of the show, does rank
Yes.
them. And the episode was on Spider-Man films, so I was a part of it, which is why I had the list ready. So I'll be quick with mine. So my number 9 is Spider-Man 3. I think the stuff that this movie gets right, it really gets right, and I think the stuff it doesn't, it really doesn't. The Sandman stuff is great. I think some of the James Franco stuff is great. When he's physically high on screen is when it goes bad because his performance just isn't there. But in concept, it works. I think again on paper the Peter Parker Venom stuff works. I don't know if the execution was brilliant, but it works on paper. And I get what they were shooting for. But that said, the Gwen Stacy stuff doesn't work. The Venom stuff doesn't work. Mary Jane's as bad as ever in this film. Yeah, again, just okay, but it's my number 9. With that said, my number 8, which I feel like this is going to wind up being a punt, is Spider-Man 2.
Punt, yeah.
Okay. So what's your number 10?
So my number 10. So it's tough because I like more than 10 Spider-Man movies, or movies that have Spider-Man in it. Far From Home is going to be my number 10.
All right. That is a punt.
Okay. So my number
So what's
9
number 9?
is Homecoming.
That is also a punt.
Okay. My number 8. I don't think this is going to be a punt. I would be surprised if this was a punt. And I think this was kind of the big surprise. I kind of said it'd be the first Amazing Spider-Man.
Technically, it is a punt, but not much of one.
Okay. All of them are punts. Okay.
All right. So with that said, my number 7 is Far From Home. So it is like technically it's a punt, but it's higher up the list. My number 7 is Far From Home. I think this is the weakest of those 3 films. But I think the Spider-Man character stuff is great. I think Gyllenhaal is great when he's not overacting, but I do think he overacts at points. Really, my biggest issue with this film, and I went into it more on the Rankum episode, is I think that the Mary Jane Peter relationship, while done well in this movie, is completely unnatural. When you look at where those characters were in Spider-Man Homecoming to where they are now, and you're keeping in mind that that's about a year and a bit worth of school time that maybe they grew closer during, and then 5 years of being dusted where they clearly did not see each other. I just think that it develops in such an unnatural way. I think her character is a complete 180 switch. They completely abandoned the gimmick that they had set up in the first one. For me, it's again, it's an 8.5 out of 10. Because the chat's blowing up about it. Spider-Man 2 is also an 8.5 out of 10. I'll get into that in a bit. These are all really good movies. Far From Home is just the worst of those 3 for me.
Yeah, and like for me with Far From Home,
for you too.
Yeah, and like I probably would have it around an 8, because like I don't think it. I agree. To me, it's the weakest of the, the Home trilogy. But I think Jake Gyllenhaal, he overacts at times, but honestly, that's perfect for Mysterio. Like Mysterio is a character that you would expect some overacting to come from any actor that plays Mysterio. He's just that, it's that type of character. I thought he was a really, really good villain in this movie. Not the best of this trilogy, but a very good villain nonetheless. And I thought he gave a really good performance in this film. The thing with the Mary Jane Peter relationship, I give it a pass because they're in high school. That was like her freshman year. So, like you're
in
going
the first film,
and like she was that type of character in the first one where like she
or
seemed like she was old.
I think they're meant to be sophomores in Homecoming.
I can't remember. They might be
Because yeah, because
either freshman sophomore.
freshman year is a prequel to Civil War, the show they're making.
Okay, yeah, because I thought they made a joke in Homecoming where it's like we're freshmen or whatever. I don't know, but maybe they're sophomores, and it would make sense based on just kind of how the movies go. But with her, like she just felt like that type of character that's going to kind of seem like she's distanced, just kind of how she acts. But you even saw with her, she was kind of opening up a little more in Homecoming, not all the way. But I mean, I work at a high school. I see a lot of kids run around, and their relationship is really, really similar to a lot of high school relationships that I see, and Ned's relationship too. Um, in the movie with Betty, that is like exactly what you see every time there's a big vacation. Like we just, I think this week, like Thursday, this past Thursday, um, there's kids currently in Italy on vacation or on a field trip, and every time you will have those, couple kids, they will date during that field trip, and then when they get back home, it's over. They break it off.
Yeah, it's very
It's almost
realistic.
like what Michael Cera and Aubrey Plaza were gonna do. They get married and then they just divorce so they can call each other ex-husband, ex-wife. That's exactly what you would see in that movie, in actual high school. It captures exactly what you expect with high school, kids and just how they act and stuff. They're Peter getting the glasses or giving the glasses to Mysterio is kind of a thing where I was like, that doesn't make sense, but whatever. Giving Tony's glasses to Mysterio doesn't make sense. Yeah, you think of the hero, but you don't really know him all that well. So why would you give him something that, you know, means a lot to you clearly because somebody you really cared about gave you, a gift? Like I wouldn't give something, from like my grandma or from, like a really close friend who passed away. I wouldn't give that gift to somebody I just met like a few days ago. But the Mysterio action sequences,
They're
especially
great.
that first one, is so good. It's so good. Action's great in this movie. The spider monkey suit was weird, or night monkey suit was a little like generic. Still a good movie. I like a lot of it, but yeah, Far From Home is my number 10. And then I said, okay, so we'll go to you again. You're number 6.
Yeah, my number 6 then is the other pump, The Amazing Spider-Man.
The
Uh,
Amazing Spider-Man. Okay.
at number 6, yeah. I've always maintained of the Spider-Man movies, it's not the best, but it might be my favorite of them. I think it's the one outside of the Spider-Verse films that I've seen the most. I think as somebody who doesn't love the first Spider-Man, which spoiler alert, the original Spider-Man is not on my top 10 list. I don't love Sam
Okay.
Raimi's Spider-Man. This movie is absolutely a rehash of it. And so if you love that movie, I understand why you may not like this one. But as someone who doesn't love that movie, I like this movie because it is telling what on paper is a great story and it's telling it in a way that appeals to me more. I think the Captain Stacy stuff is really well done. I think the performances across the board are excellent. The only real big negative of the film is I think the lizard stuff is a bit rushed, especially when you compare to the build-up the Raimi films were given Dylan Baker. But Reese Ifans gives a great performance, and I think he sells it as much as he possibly can for how quick it happens. And especially the relationship, like going the route of he was your dad's best friend, and so it's believable that you would sort of latch onto that very quickly because you're trying to find any remnant of your parents to latch onto. So I
Right.
buy into that aspect of it. Action's really well done. I do think this is the best Spider-Man we've had in terms of how he personifies Spider-Man. Um, and his Peter Parker's okay, but yeah, that's it. So, anyways, your thoughts?
Yeah. I quite enjoy this movie. The more I think about it, the more I really like it. It's not my favorite Spider-Man movie, obviously, because it's my number 8. But I think Andrew Garfield's really good in the movie. Yeah, not too big on the Peter Parker being too cool for school type of feel, walking around with a skateboard and stuff. Like little things like that, I wasn't too big on. I didn't think the Lizard was a good villain. I thought the performance was good, but I just didn't think the character was all that great in the movie. I think the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone is really, really good in this movie. I think she's a great Gwen Stacy. Um, agree with you. Action's really, really good in the film. It's really well shot too. Like that's another thing. I think the cinematography is really good. Yeah, they try to copy some things from Raimi's original Spider-Man movie with some of the people in there, and had that fight kind of where they're working on the city. A little different because the people are actually helping him get across to where he needs to go. But yeah, I mean, it's a good movie. Andrew Garfield performances are all great in the film. I think Peter's parents stuff having a little more to do with the story. It's obviously more involved in the second film, but with the first movie, I like that they use some of that a little more. The whole like with Uncle Ben, kind of where it sets up to him dying, I didn't think was quite as strong as the first one.
Right, fair.
But I mean, the performance was all still really good. I think Andrew Garfield is, as far as Peter Parker's my third favorite, but Spider-Man, he's either my first or second favorite. It's tough. I think Tom Holland's really made a case for like Spider-Man with No Way Home. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Better than what I remembered it being, but it's not my favorite Spider-Man film.
Yeah, fair enough. What's your number 7?
So my number 7 is actually going to be the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film.
Great.
That is going to be my number 7.
I'll just say quickly, as I said, not on my list. Again, since I'm plugging it, go check out Malcolm's Rankum episode if you want to hear my thoughts. I won't take up time saying it again. So go ahead.
Right. Oh yeah. So for me, I think for one, this came out at like the perfect time. This really kicked off that superhero, movie, genre, if you want to call it that, where, they were starting to be handled with more care. That X-Men Blade were really the ones that really kick-started it at that point in time. Because, I mean, Batman was downhill, or was down kind of in the toilet, same with Superman. But, I thought the performances all, besides like maybe one or two, were quite good. I think, yeah, Tobey Maguire was 27 when he started playing Spider-Man, but he looks like Peter Parker. And honestly, I think he does a really good job as Peter Parker too. I think he's a really good Peter Parker in this film. And I think him and Mary Jane, their chemistry is quite good in this film too, for the little bit that they have. I think the Uncle Ben stuff was all great in this film, especially kind of with how they handled his death and just what set up his death, which, Spider-Man 3 kind of ruined. But I thought that was all good. Willem Dafoe is great in this movie as the Green Goblin. One of the best performances by a comic book villain of all time, I think, is in this one and in No Way Home. But he's great in this film. I think Harry and Peter's, chemistry, their relationship is really well done in this film too. I think the action's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's silly, it's a little corny, sure, but I mean, it's a 2000 whatever Sam Raimi. I mean, this was like this was right in prime Sam Raimi age, where yeah, he was gonna be a little silly, a little corny and stuff. But I thought it all worked for Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's not really that serious of a character. And look, he did throw in some jokes and stuff. I think J.K. Simmons in this movie is really good too. The wrestling stuff was fun. Yeah, some people might not really appreciate some of the jokes that are thrown there, but I think honestly, like, people go, well, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man didn't really have the quippy jokes. I mean, he did more in Spider-Man 2, but he did in this one too. The final fight between Spider-Man and Green Goblin, where it's just them one-on-one, the brutal violence in that fight was so good. So good, so brutal. You like hurt watching that movie because of some of the punches. You feel some of the swings that the Green Goblin puts on, Spider-Man. And again, it's just the performances of those two going back and forth, bouncing off each other, I think is great. And of course, you had the whole thing where he had Norman, trying to convince Peter, hey, look, man, don't look, I'm done, look, it got a hold of me, but I'm back, like, trust me, believe in me, I care about you, you're like a son to me. And it was all like a trick. I loved it. And then of course you had like the little Sam Raimi stuff thrown in there too. The whole bridge thing, where it was like, hey, you got to choose between Mary Jane or this bus, that was well done too. Just like little tricks that they did, like you can see in his eyes, you can see Mary Jane falling, and you can see the bus falling. Just little things like that really add to it as well. Like it's not like Green Goblin is a really violent, serious type of villain where he's not like kind of a silly guy. He's not like the Lizard where he's just kind of in there. Like he's a legit threat of, oh, I don't care, I'll kill whoever to get what I want. Is it the best Spider-Man movie? No, but I think it's a really good, especially for its time, it's a really good origin film. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And it, there's, like, it doesn't surprise me that it was breaking box office records at that time. So that is my number 7. And then my number 6 is going to be Avengers Endgame.
Okay. So I made a choice personally. I put the one that I think he is the best in on that list. I left the other 2 off. So Endgame's not on my list.
So it's not on there. Okay. Endgame, I think, to me, look, I think it's a really good movie. The first 2 acts I think are pretty good, not like great, but that third act where you have the big fight and you have everybody coming in and all this stuff, I think is really good. Is it the best of Spider-Man, like the best that Tom Holland has been in? Not necessarily, but there are moments in that film, like when Tony's dying, you have that scene where you can, see Tom Holland's giving it his all. When Tony hugs him, you really feel that, especially with the other Marvel movies he was in prior. It really just a perfect culmination of phase 1 through 3. And honestly, I think it would have been a perfect conclusion to the MCU if they wanted to end it right there and just let Spider-Man continue and have that kind of be its own thing. And obviously, No Way Home would have been the perfect, like, okay, he's out of the MCU, and, MCU's officially over. Here's Spider-Man for now on, and we'll just focus on other things with the Marvel characters we own. But yeah, I just really enjoy that film all around. Great action. Yeah, it's pretty long, but I think they do a really good job. They wrap a lot of things up in the phases perfectly. Little callbacks, like Cap holding Thor's hammer was great. It also dealt with, like depression, I thought decently, with Thor, I thought it was decent. Yeah, some of the jokes, you can kind of argue weren't really well done, but just like Thor and just how, how he responded after, everything with Thanos and him realizing, no, I probably can't, fix what I caused, because the stones are gone. And just him eating and sitting around playing video games and just being, like me. He's like me. He relates to a lot of people in that. But no, I think it's a really well written film. It's well directed, and I think that film, along with other films in the MCU, have shown that the Russos should never direct anything that's not Marvel. Because boy, Cherry is a fun film.
What do you mean? His asshole was incredible in it. With
the
that
anus
said,
trip.
I'll jump into my number 5, which normally when I make lists, with the rare exception, I make lists based on the score I gave the film and then I rank it individually. Yeah. This is a case where quality-wise, I think this film is better than what I'm going to list as my 4 and my 3, but I put it at my number 5 because I can acknowledge it's an incredibly made film while also saying I don't love it necessarily, and that is Spider-Man No Way Home.
Punt.
Okay. What is your number 5?
My number 5 is going to be Infinity War.
Okay, good.
So Infinity War is obviously the one non-Spider-Man titled MCU film Tom Holland is in the most out of all of these films. I think the reason why I have this ahead of Endgame as well, Endgame has the better third act, just incredible third act. I think from Act 1 through Act 3, this is the better written film. This is the better directed film. I think the way they were able to take, and honestly, I think you could have made a case, and a lot of people will probably disagree with me. I think you could have made a case that the Russos should have been at least considered for a Best Director nomination, because taking all these different films and the tones and the styles, like Iron, you're taking the Avengers, the Guardians, Spider-Man, Black Panther, all these things, and putting it together and having it all work and make sense, and having the Thanos storyline in there as well, and not having this film be led by the Avengers, but led by Thanos, and have him be the main character in this film. It's not easy to do. Not a lot of directors would have been able to pull this film off, just because, like I said, Black Panther is a different film than like the Avengers films. Yeah, there's some MCU comedy, but it's a different type of movie. The Guardians is a different type of movie than a lot of the MCU stuff, because it's a straight up comedy. Spider-Man's a different character. You have all these different things. So I think the Russos did a great job. This is, in my opinion, their best work in the MCU outside of the Winter Soldier. Take that out of it, I think this is their best job, just because of how difficult it is to pull it off. You got the emotions in there. Even the comic book fans, for just a second, thought, oh, everybody's dying. And then they realized, oh, yeah, we got Endgame coming out later. But you got Tom Holland's performance at the end when he's dusting away, where that was improv and just really, really good. And that almost got me to shed a tear, too. Action's great in this film. It will fly by. I think, I'm not a big fan of a lot of the groups splitting up, but the way they did in this film, I think, was really well done as well, with Thor, Rocket, and Groot being together. I just think it's a really well done film. So I have that at 5, and that is, I cannot read the. There we go. But yeah, I think that's my number 5.
All right. So my number 4 is Homecoming, which I think you already said.
Yeah, that was my number 9.
Yeah. Again, I think I score No Way Home higher. I think it's a better made film than Homecoming. Homecoming's my personal favorite of the 3. I think it handles the high school element better than any Spider-Man film has done previously or to date. I think for the time period it was made in, it handles it the most realistically, while also having that John Hughes feel that I think really works for it. I like the characters in this movie. I think Vulture's one of the better villains in the MCU, let alone a Spider-Man film. And I think, despite the fact that a lot of people don't like that Tony Stark's in the movie, I think that he serves a great mentor role. I view him in this movie as very similar to the Captain Stacy character in Amazing Spider-Man, just he has powers. So he obviously plays situations differently, but he is the same type of character. And at the end of the day, this isn't a Spider-Man movie. This isn't an Iron Man movie with Spider-Man in it, like a lot of people have tried to say. This is a Spider-Man movie, and this is him growing into that role. And I think they do it really well.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy this film too quite a bit. I agree. As far as the high school element, it's the best of the films in general. I think Tony Stark should have been in this movie. I think not having him in it would have been a mistake, just because, just how they set it up with Civil War, where he kind of took him under his wing. It makes sense. Plus, based on where the film starts, it's shortly after the stuff in Civil War and all that stuff. So it made sense to me. I think the actors are all really good. I think Michael Keaton's great as the Vulture in this film too. I watched this film, and the reason why it's not higher on my list is because I watch it more, and unlike some of these other movies, it doesn't really move for me. It just kind of stays put. It's a good origin film, but to me, I think The Amazing Spider-Man's a better origin film, and I think that the original Spider-Man's a better origin film. First film in a trilogy. They're all still quite good. I enjoy all these movies in my top 10. But yeah, and then there's like things that they set up that aren't really happening. Maybe they happen in the 4th Spider-Man film with Scorpion and some of the other things. And now you have Morbius, which kind of threw everything, all over the place, with Michael Keaton and stuff. I don't know what they're going to do. But I enjoy it.
MCU goes back there, I think they ignore Morbius.
Yeah, you got to ignore it. Just say that never happened. It was a fever dream.
My number 3 is Civil War. Or wait, no, you had your number 4, right?
Yeah, I have my number 4, which is Into
right.
the Spider-Verse.
Which would technically be a punt. So,
Okay.
my number 4 is Civil War. Simply put, I think this is the best introduction to Spider-Man we've ever had. He's basically only in 2 extended sequences in this film, but I think very quickly, very succinctly, they introduce who this character is, how he operates, how his mind thinks, his personality, how he vibes off of the other characters, especially because this is a very different environment than we've ever seen Spider-Man be in. I think they established the relationship between May and Peter very well, very quickly. Yeah, just that's most of what I can say because I want to focus on the Spider-Man of it. The overall film is obviously really, really excellent, but the Spider-Man of it, I really, really enjoy, and I think that it's a great introduction to him in this. So it'd be my number 3.
Yeah,
And then
it's not on my list. Civil
That's
War's
right.
not on my list. I am in the minority. I didn't think it was all that great. I thought the Spider-Man stuff was good. Like I thought Tom Holland was obviously the show. Tom Holland was a great choice to be Peter Parker, but I just felt like there's things in this film with Zemo that I just feel like don't make sense. Where things have to go perfect for his plan to work, and if something changes, his plan doesn't work, and the CG at times was quite bad. Stark de-aging, Robert Downey Jr. de-aging wasn't great. You could tell it's shot on a green screen at the airport. There's before they actually fight, where it shows Robert Downey Jr. standing. You could tell it's a green screen. It didn't look like they were at an airport, and just some bad CG. I didn't think it was that good. It was all right. It's actually towards the bottom of my MCU list.
Oh, that's fair. We're on opposite ends there, but fair enough.
Yeah.
What is your number 3?
So my number 3 is going to be Across the Spider-Verse, which I assume is a punt.
A punt, yeah.
Okay.
My number 2 is Into the Spider-Verse. I'm exhausted at this point, so I genuinely can't say much more about these movies. Yeah. My number two is Into the Spider-Verse. I've talked multiple times about it on a public forum. I'll plug Noah McCausland, who's been on the show before. His podcast, McLovin's Movie Moments. It's on podcast services. I did a whole episode dedicated to this movie with him. I talked about it last week on Rankum. If it weren't for the fact that I'm exhausted, I would say more, but I've said all I can say about this. I think it's excellent. I think it's a masterpiece, and it's my number 2. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, and it's my number 4. I think it's great. I truly do love this movie. I think it's a great introduction to Miles, and I think it does a great job of getting people that don't really know who Miles is to know who Miles is and to love Miles. And I think they handled the Spider-Verse stuff in this movie quite well. I thought, the characters like Penny and you have Spider-Ham and Spider-Noir, all, the Spider-Men and Spider-Women that they show in this film. I think they're all fun. Yeah, I don't think it's a perfect film. Doesn't mean as much to me, which, is kind of why it's at 4. But I do think it's a great film, and I do love it. And it's definitely one of the best Spider-Man movies, let alone Marvel movies, maybe of all time.
Fair enough. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is No Way Home.
Okay.
I absolutely love this film. For one, I think for what they were going for, I think it's a really well done film. I think John Watts, his directing is at the best. Because with his first 2, I guess his directing just with the camera work and stuff wasn't that great. It was just kind of basic, comic book stuff. But there's more. I wish they would have, stuck on certain characters a little bit longer before switching to other characters. That's really kind of a nitpick at that point. But I think he does his best job in this film. I think it's really well written. I think it handles the Spider-Verse stuff quite well in this film too. It's not just cameos to be cameos. The cameos are actual plot points in this film, which, if they were just going to do like hey, it's Spider-Man versus, the Rhino, right? Like Spider-Man versus the Rhino, but you have some of these characters pop in, for a little bit, then yeah, I can understand some people not liking it as much, but, Doc Ock, Electro, Sandman, Green Goblin, especially Green Goblin, they all, for the movie, what the plot is, they all have to be in this film. Same thing with the other Spider-Man. It all just makes sense. It all works. I like I say, it's not just glorified cameos. I think they should be in the film. Like the film works with them in it, and I think the film would hurt and wouldn't be quite as good if you didn't have Toby or Andrew in the film. Maybe you could take away one of the villains, but the majority of them should be in it. Maybe you take out Sandman or the Lizard and you would still have as good of a film, but they add to the film too. There's obviously the connections with Peter and stuff, and you get some good one-on-one discussions with some of these guys. The Lizard I think is better in this film, oddly enough, than I think in Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, he's kind of in there to be in there, but like the whole thing, like he wanted to turn everybody to lizards, and he's like, hey, he turns to Electro. It's like, hey, I can make you better. And it's like, by make me a lizard. And he goes, exactly. Like, it's all, I think the comedy works really, really well in this film. I think this is the best Zendaya is in these films. Having Doctor Strange, I think, was a good idea as well. And it sets up, kind of what's to come with Multiverse Madness, kind of, and, some of the other stuff too. But, yeah, I absolutely love this film. It means a lot to me because of, some of the characters I grew up watching and loving. One of the craziest theater experiences I think I'll ever have is going to this on opening night. So that's my number 2. And I could tell you're about to fall asleep, so I don't want to bore you.
I'm sorry. I'm
no, you're good.
I'm getting like a truck. It hit me like a truck 15 minutes ago.
You're good.
What was that? Number 2? Number 1,
number
Across the Spider-Verse. I think I said everything I had to say in our episode, let alone anywhere else I've spoken about it. Like I said, we spent a whole hour on it last week plus, and I think it's brilliant. Your number 1, if I'm tracking everything right, is Spider-Man 2, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it
go ahead.
Is.
I'll just say really quickly, because it was called out earlier that I had it so low.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the Raimi films. The first one doesn't even chart the list for me. Spider-Man 3 is my 9. Spider-Man 2 is my 8. I'm not a fan overall of these films. That said, this one is far and away the best made, and I think there's an argument of it's one of the best made Spider-Man films overall. The filmmaking in this is really, really strong from Raimi. It's one of the better screenplays of these movies.
Yeah.
I just don't love any of these main 3 in their roles. I think they all have weak points in their acting throughout these films. But this is easily far and away the best of them. And if any of these films is going to be anyone's number 1, I totally understand why.
Yeah, and like I'll just briefly say Across Spider-Verse, because we talked about it, like you said, a few weeks back,
right.
For like an hour. But I think it's a masterpiece. It's just it's going to push animation to places where it hasn't been. And I think you're going to see over the next few years a lot of animated films take inspiration from some of the things they do in this film, the way they blend live action into it too, with Donald Glover, and taking some scenes from the other Spider-Man stuff was cool too. Just a great film. Absolutely loved it, and I can understand why it's number 1 for anybody. For me, Spider-Man 2 I think it's not my favorite superhero movie of all time. That's not Winter Soldier, Logan. That's my favorite comic book film. But I think this is the perfect comic book film, the perfectly made comic book film. Easily, I think it's the best Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, obviously, because 7 versus 1. I think it's very well written. I think and if you watch again, I mean, every time I watch this film, it gets better and better and better. I think Tobey Maguire is at his best in this film. He gives a great performance, in my opinion. Obviously, Alfred Molina gives a great performance as Doc Ock. And to me, if it wasn't for Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, I would say he's the best Spider-Man villain in any film in this movie. I think he's great in this film. I think the turn from being a good guy to a bad guy, it makes perfect sense. The hospital scene where he's in the hospital and it's shot like a straight up horror film is just terrifying and just so well done in this film. Some of the camera shots being at the point of view of the tentacles, it's just like it establishes that scene alone establishes just the threat of Doc Ock. It's not like a silly villain, like it could have been just like a silly villain, but that scene right there, and outside of like Venom and Spider-Man 3, I think what Raimi does a great job with Green Goblin and with Doc Ock and with Sandman is not only are they villains that yeah, they start off good and you can understand some of their, actions, and you can understand certain things, and they're not truly evil. It's something controlling them or something pushing them to do the things that they do. I think Sam Raimi does a great job with most of the villains, at least villains that he wants to actually have in his movies. He does a great job with. Doc Ock's great. I think I always forget her name, but Mary Jane, I think she's great in this film too.
Kirsten Dunst.
I think there's Kristen Dunst. There's thank you. There's there's a scene where they're kind of outside and they're chatting. It's just Peter and MJ. There's great character moments like that in this film. I think just the whole, when he finally gets his power back and he gets his suit from J.K. Simmons and he's going to go after Doc Ock, it's so good. That is a scene that if that movie came out today, that is a scene I can imagine everybody, so many theaters full of people just cheering, because it's a great scene. And then you have what I think is the greatest action sequence in any comic book movie, the train fight. It is so well shot. It is so good. The tension is there. It's one of my favorite action sequences in any movie. It's so well done. I absolutely love this film. To me, it's a top 5 comic book film. I think honestly, it might even be a top 4, top 3. It's a great movie. I absolutely love this film. This is if I was going to show a movie to somebody who has never seen comic movie before and they wanted to get into comic book films, this is the movie I would recommend to them. Not the first Spider-Man movie. It would be Spider-Man 2, because you understand basic concept. You don't, if you're wanting to get into comic book movies and you've never seen any before, you probably know Peter Parker's Spider-Man, just like you know that Clark Kent is Superman.
Right.
He's a synonymous. So I would be like, hey, watch Spider-Man 2, because I just think it's the perfect superhero movie. It's not the best superhero movie, but it's the perfect superhero movie. I mean, I could talk about this movie for 4 or 5 hours straight. No problem. I love this film. I'm going to watch it after the show.
Only if I get to go to bed and come back, and we'll see if you're still here.
There we go. Yeah,
That'd be a hell of a stream.
I adore it. And I think James Franco is at his best too in this film. Yeah, he's not great. He's not great in this film, but he was not a good actor at this point.
I don't love any of them in any of these roles, but they are all their best in this film. I think you're absolutely correct.
And heck, the whole demonstration scene where his Doc Off's wife gets offed. I think that's a great scene too. I think that's a really well done scene, and you can see kind of there's a little bit of respect when he saves Harry from potentially dying. Where it's I hate you, but thank you. I still hate you, but thank you for.
I still hate you, but you didn't let me die, so I'll take it.
It might be my favorite Sam Raimi movie too, and I'm a big Sam Raimi guy. Maybe even over Evil Dead 2.
Fair enough. All right, guys. Well, that is going to be it for tonight's Battleground casual episode. Be sure to tune in next week. I believe, as we discussed, Matt unfortunately won't be able to be here next week. Is that correct? Right?
I should be in for the first part of it, but not for Flash.
For Flash, okay.
Yeah, maybe talk about Flash and then send me a message hey, we're done with the Flash, and I'll hop back on. But if I see the Flash before then, I'll definitely be on.
All right. Well, either way, guys, we will be back next week with a spoiler talk on the Flash. And hopefully I won't be quite as exhausted so we can make it through the whole episode. But with that said, we hope you guys enjoyed. Please be sure to rate the video, comment, subscribe, and stick around for more episodes of the show. And since we don't have a proper outro yet, probably won't bother developing one. I'm just going to play this instead one more time. Have a great night, guys.
Yeah, here you go.
Hey there, kids. It's time to sit because Battleground Casual is on. Here's Aaron or Matt.